and we had the mass amount of absentee ballots with the same names and the same handwriting on top that I noticed because I was a precinct chair.
Mm-hmm. But it embarrassed Utah on across the world, not just across the states. Corruption always precedes communism. It always precedes the fall of a nation.
I will provide you with a dirty number so that you can work. Oh, great, now I can work. But once they're there, then they use and abuse them to commit crimes.
Welcome out to God and Country. I'm Uriah Kennedy, and this is Ingrid Bettridge. We want to make sure everybody's liking, subscribing, and sharing us out there on social media. Again, we're just trying to get past the whole YouTube suppression and get as big as possible. We have a pretty significant amount of information that comes out on these podcasts, so they are long format, several hours long, but listen to 20, 30 minutes a day, and you'll get a pretty significant amount of information that you will enjoy. This week, we've got Jennifer Garner on with us. Jennifer Garner is running for Utah Senate.
District 7.
District 7, running against Stuart Adams, and as well as Braden Hess is running, and who else was running? I don't remember the last person.
There's like 5.
Stephanie Hollis.
Stephanie Hollis or something like that. So, a lot of people running against Stuart Adams. We would like to, I love the guy. So, Stuart, if you're listening to this, I love you, man. You're a neighbor of mine for a long time, but we want to get somebody else in there right now to see what other progress we can make.
I think it's time. I do. And there was one more candidate who I got a flyer or a text or a phone call from, and I thought, well, why weren't they at the debate? It was mail. So I'll have to look, but you can't not come to the debates and let the voters talk to you face to face and then just campaign by text and email and flyers.
I know we spoke about this in both debates, both the sheriff's debate as well as the Davis County debate. I've spoke about in Utah County and Salt Lake County ever is SB 54's got to go. Signature process is destroying this state. We have too many senators currently in the Utah Senate that will not repeal that. And so even though we could probably pass it in the House, it will die flat death in the Senate right now. And obviously Caucus would never sign that anyway, so we would have to have
great senators and a great governor. So if we can just get a great senator.
Yeah. Lots of good bills die in the Senate.
Mm-hmm. But we can change that.
Last session we had a number of good bills.
Absolutely.
Trevor Lee put forth a number of good bills. They went through the House and died in the Senate.
Yeah, I think that was more retribution than anything else. I think that it was a personality conflict and not a bill conflict.
Oh, that's how our country should be run in our state as well. That's great.
We should run policy off of how much you like somebody, not off of what good it actually does for the state or for the country. It's just kind of how things are running.
Well, that's why we need to change.
For sure. So let's start from the beginning. Where do you come from? Where do you get your morals and values from? And what caused you to run?
So I was born in Idaho. The economy in Utah actually brought my family here when I was very young. But I have lived in Weber County and Davis County. I am a mom. I have a master's degree. And a lot of my experience, I have over 15 years of experience working with families trying to get out of homelessness, family dysfunction, intergenerational poverty. I've worked a lot on grants, but I have used those in a way that I know that the taxpayer funds are to be used, not like holy money, but that's how I look at it, because it's not my money, it's someone else's. And so I've always worked to give money back. I think we have a a culture where you got to spend it so you can get some more next time.
So what was your master's in?
I was in management and leadership. So I currently teach financial literacy in higher ed. I help students get to the end of graduation without taking on those awful student loans. They're amortized like home loans. I don't think a lot of people know that. So they are the chains of debt. And then I also help them avoid predatory lending and just spreading more information about education. I come from learning firsthand Howard W. Hunter's Law of the Harvest. Have you heard?
Yes.
Are you familiar with this
Yeah,
one?
they used to have the little booklet, and they'd kind of give you your settlement.
Yeah. So the Howard W. Hunter said we take from the haves and give to the have-nots, or the government will take from the haves and give to the have-nots, and we have robbed both of them. We've robbed the giver of being able to give in the way that they want to give, and we've robbed the receiver of the opportunity to earn it, to really feel like it's theirs. And I see this over and over in a lot of our benefits. There's this huge benefits cliff that we incentivize people to not get a job, because then their rent goes up and they lose their food stamps and they lose their Medicaid, but then we don't give them anything on the other end. From the numbers that I'm seeing, it's about $70,000. It's income of $70,000. So anybody who makes less than that, we're incentivized to just give up and go on public benefits. And I think that's wrong. I think it's not compassionate, and I think it tells people that they're not worth our time.
So how do these people find you?
So I'm just on campus, and before I was a contractor.
Is this the Weber State campus?
Yes. So in the past, I worked on a grant where I had to go find people. So I went to where we had a lot of family dysfunction. I went into the shelters. I went into helping people with disabilities, finding jobs and things like that. And there are so many people out there that want to help, but they want it to be in the best way. And when our tax dollars are taken and spent in ways that aren't responsible,
Forced charity,
it grows resentment in people. And then we see someone in need, and it's our brother or our sister, and then we say, roll down their window and they hear, "Go get a job." And that's not necessarily the way we should be taking care of our brothers and sisters. But the government has kind of gone the wrong direction on that, and I think it's harmful to people.
Well, I think the government has purposely gone the wrong direction on that. It started with the left, with the Democrats, because they've gone more socialistic, but they want dependency. That's been their goal from the beginning, is if you are dependent on the government, you'll vote more free stuff in, thus you'll vote me into office. And because the right, we're so weak most of the time, we don't stand up and fight, we've kind of molded with that. So you'll get a lot of those lukewarm, so-called conservative people, and then you'll get a lot of the rhinos that like that social assistance side of things, and they'll also vote it in. And right now, it's become such a plague that going clear back to the 30s and 40s, if you discuss Social Security, if you discuss Medicare, Medicaid, it's a pariah, it's a plague, you'll get ousted, no one wants to talk to you anymore because you can't touch it. It's untouchable right now, at least nationally. And state-wise, people have tried tackling it, but have not been successful at all.
Well, state-wise, we've got whistleblowers on the inside that get retaliated against for saying anything about it. And I think that's wrong. We've got this culture of spend the money, spend the money, spend the money so you can ask for more money next time. But then they're not even asking for the data. The legislature gives these funds and then they don't even ask for the data on how effective that program was. And then they just hand it out again. I think that whole culture needs a shift where we say, okay, if you can do it for less than you thought you could do it for, then you're going to be the one that gets your foot in the door for the next application. That's what we're going to be looking at. I'm also concerned about our taxes. We keep being told, oh, it's the biggest tax decrease that you've ever had. We've cut taxes left and right. But in 2018, there was a bill called HB 298, and most of the counties work on a levy for your property taxes. Mm-hmm. So it's the final amount that they need. And if the home values go up, your percentage is supposed to go down. But HB 298 froze that tax levy for 5 years. So when property taxes increased, or when our property values increased, so did our taxes. But yet we're being told, oh, it's a decrease, a decrease, a decrease. Well, we all can see on our own property tax statements that it's gone up. So when we're being told, oh, you got a tax cut, well, no, we didn't. They took some other taxes as well and sent them to other entities to collect. So while one place might get to say that they reduced our taxes, they've gone up in other areas. And I think we need some more transparency around that.
So what would you do? Would you just reverse 218 or change the verbiage in it?
So 218 is done. It was frozen for 5 years. I think that there's some other legislation that has increased our taxes because I think it was Stuart Barlow passed a bill that any special or any district, this could be your water district, your other districts, they're now considered special districts. And then another bill came in and said, and that which they passed, that they could increase taxes however they wanted to. I think this also comes into play with the incremental financing. If a developer, we've really incentivized overdevelopment of high density housing in the name of save us from our housing crisis, but the data isn't clear there either. The information coming out of some places was, oh, we're going to have 1 million people move in. It's time to panic. And then we didn't have 1 million people. But we still incentivized using taxpayer funds, using incremental financing. And right now, the numbers that I'm seeing are we have overbuilt on high density housing. And some of my opponents would love to say, oh, well, let's now do the same thing with single family homes. The government has screwed this up. The government needs to get out and let the free market heal.
Were these high density housing, are they being built on places that were already zoned for multi-unit housing, or were we rezoning areas?
So the state legislature decided that they needed to be the ones to set the zoning. And in 2019, there was 2023, there was a bill that came through that said if you're near if you are near the traffic zones, the front runner, where those places are, then you automatically have high density housing zones around there, and those are called HCRTs, I think. But they also were the linchpin for bringing in those incremental financing. So incremental financing, okay, let's say I'm a developer and I'm going to build 30 apartments so that nobody panics, right? Because if it's 150, everybody panics. And there's a reason why. I'm going to build downtown. Well, first of all, that property isn't affordable. Those apartments are never going to be affordable because I've already started to build them in places where they're not going to be affordable. Then I allow, if 40% of those apartments are low income housing, I can borrow from taxpayer funds at 3%. Nobody's getting 3%. That doesn't even keep up with our inflation. So we're losing money on our taxpayer funds that go into financing the infrastructure for these. Then they also created, it's kind of like a bond where cities and counties could do a bond, and the schools could say, hey, we need a new school, so we're going to do a 30-year bond. So it took the next 30 years gambling with what that property value is going to look like, took that money up front to help build it. And in some places like Tooele and Colville, we're already seeing those public infrastructure districts fail. And I think it's going to come back hard on the citizens that had nothing to do with making that agreement.
And by fail, you mean they're not being sold? Nobody's moving into these units?
Whether they're being sold or whether they're being rented, they don't have the occupancy that they thought they would because the data was never right. It was never right. But I think the dollar signs in their eyes were just too big, and they thought, oh, we're doing a good thing. And so they built and they built and they built. There's a property near me in Layton that I've been watching it for the past a year, and there are 7 cars in the parking lot, and it's been open for a year. We have some, and it's not just in Davis County, it's in Salt Lake County, those huge stack and packs. They're not being able to refinance because they don't have the occupancy that's required to refinance, and it's happening in Utah County as well.
So will they lower the cost?
It should, but instead of lowering the cost, they're trying to bring people in by 8 weeks of free rent. But then your rent for a studio apartment is still $1,300, $1,250.
Well, I think that's what the intent was. Is there's a massive housing price problem here in Utah. Our home values are just obscene. You could go down to Texas and buy double the house for half the price. Any of these flatter states where we don't have mountains on both sides that are pushing us in and limiting the land, but the property values in Utah are just astronomical. They should not be what they are right now. I mean, there's 3,000, 4,000 square foot houses that are 50 years old going for $500,000 and $600,000 right now in the state of Utah, which is obscene.
Yeah, you checked out my house, built in the 50s. Seriously, Mike, you must have a crystal ball, because that is exactly it. My home was built in 58, and it's about 2,900 square feet.
I had a friend of mine just sold their house. It was 3,800 square feet. Old split level, really old split level, $600,000. Nobody can afford that. So we're completely pricing out the first-time home buyer. The kids coming out of college, the newlyweds, they can't afford any of this, none of it. And so the whole motivation behind this high-density housing was, well, let's get some homes out there, some condos, some townhouses that are $200,000, $300,000. And so we get all these developers out there developing, but like you're saying, they're forced to develop on really, really expensive land, and that expensive land's got to get divided out amongst all the apartments, which when you're buying that apartment, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 of that apartment's the land only, just to pay for the land, and then you have to have all the improvements on top of that. The building fees, city building fees are astronomical nowadays. I don't know how cities are getting away with charging what they're charging for, because it's just an extra tax. So the building charges that they're going to charge for it, and then that gets it added into these condo and townhome values. And so you have this small 1,800, 2,000 square foot townhouse or condo that should be selling in the $200,000 or $300,000 range, also selling for $400,000, $450,000, and just you get these $1,300, $1,800 a month payments. So you're not helping the market. And so there's a lot of people who love to move into those. I don't think the demand is as narrow as what you think it is. I think the problem is we're still pricing people out because of where we're zoning it and how much land is costing nowadays.
Sure. And I mean, I think there's some balance, right? Like I didn't buy my first house at 18 or right when I graduated. Like but that gap
the average,
between,
just so you know, the average first-time home buyer in the United States right now is 40.
I saw that. Yeah, it's
40.
gone further and further away, and it
used to be 28.
Right.
Now it's 40.
Yeah, it's insane. But building more high-density housing is not answering this question. People don't want to live in stack and packs. They don't want to hear all
Especially
this
stack and
stuff.
packs right next to the major. If they allow townhomes or condos like rural, they'd be cheaper because the rural land is cheaper. But people don't want stack and packs out in the rural areas where their homes are, because it supposedly degrades the home values. And so it forces them to be in the commercial areas, the long State Street, and the land around there is just more expensive.
Right. Well, and they mandated it as well. So a few years ago, the legislature mandated each city had to have 17% high density housing. So Fruit Heights, that's like in my district, they have 9 acres of undeveloped property. 9. What is that going to look like if they have to keep up with the 17%? Kaysville City, they've pushed back on things and they've delayed building of some high density housing. And now I'm hoping that they're going to see, hey, it's not even a wise decision to build this high density housing right off the freeway, because we don't have people to put in it, because we already have it. We have already overbuilt on the apartments. So the same mandate that kind of ruined high density housing, they think the answer to this is more mandates from the state for single family housing. And I think we need the market to correct, land to open up, and the government to get out of controlling things.
Which includes the cities. The cities have got to stop restricting it so much and stop taxing it so much with the building, with the building costs and all that kind of stuff, the building permit fees.
Absolutely.
They're making it obscene. So my parents live in Alpine, and I lived in Alpine for quite a while as well. So Alpine had the same mandate, but Alpine really tries to keep their high-end only, monstrosities only, $1 million homes only. I mean, that's Alpine's forte. And so even with that mandate coming down from the state, Alpine City Council said, no, we're not following it. And they just flat out just said no. And so the state sued them to force them into it. So Alpine City got sued. And this was a big thing in about 6-7 years ago with that Alpine, because they were really snubbing their nose against everybody else. It was an honest problem. And and me looking at it, I'm like, no, you guys need to drop your snub nose and get with the game. And so what Alpine City did was they got sued, and they allowed to have mother-in-law apartments and condos in the houses, because they weren't even allowing that. If you had a mother-in-law apartment, you had a basement apartment like that, they were forbidding people from renting it out. So even if you had it, you couldn't rent it out. It was against city code to rent it out in Alpine. So Alpine finally said, well, we're not going to allow townhomes or condos rebuilt in our city, so we're going to rescind this mandate and allow mother-in-law apartments and basement apartments to start being rented out. All of a sudden, they met the code, because every house out there started renting out these, including my parents. They have a mother-in-law apartment downstairs that they rent out, and so everybody started renting those out. That's how they met the code. But it made a lot of inexpensive housing, because most were being rented out for $1,000, $1,200 for these large apartments in these really, really nice neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So that helped some of it, but the problem still comes back to when cities are mandated to have high-density housing, they say, fine, we're going to do it, but then they force it into only certain areas of the city, and they make those areas really small. They make them right next to high-traffic areas.
Yeah.
And it's in the land prices, because it's literally commercial land, and commercial land goes for a lot more than residential land.
Right. But they're also protected as when it comes time for more property taxes. So 2 years ago, Senator McKay tried to pass SB 50 that would say, hey, the commercial properties just need to report to the county assessor's office, so that when taxes increase, it doesn't land on the residential homes, because the property value of those commercial properties stays stagnant. Like, they don't have updates on those every single year. And if they do get updated, then they'll bring something in that says, hey, you don't have any, or the property owners will bring something to the county that says, you can't prove that that's what my property is worth. And so then their property taxes stay stagnant, and then the rest of us kind of lift the burden on that. And these huge high density housing, they're not going to get the tax. Like, having single family homes will provide more tax revenue than high density housing, because they do it once, and then the rest of it's protected because it's commercial property and considered proprietary information.
Interesting.
And that bill did not pass, by the way. Senator McKay's bill did not pass, and I think he took a hit by some special interest groups for that.
I mean, Utah is very, very unique. Let's just get down to that. I mean, Utah is very, very unique. We're not Denver. We're not Phoenix, that can just sprawl and sprawl and sprawl and sprawl. It's just not possible. We have very limited valleys, very limited housing. That's why Tooele and Grantsville is growing so much. That's why Eagle Mountain is exploding. So the fastest growing community in the country right now.
Wow.
Is Eagle Mountain, because everybody's trying to get farther and further out, because the land gets more and more expensive, because housing is just not affordable anymore.
Yeah.
It's just not affordable.
I love that you're so informed on this. It's great.
Politics, well, I was a home builder for a long time.
Oh, it's great.
I stay informed on it, but the city politics keeps getting in the way. And it's a lot of times it's not really come down from the state, but the state needs to control or do something to force city councils to allow lesser expensive housing, but in areas where it's actually less expensive.
Or we need to vote in better city councils, because I don't know if I want more government top down telling the city what to do.
Yeah, 2 years ago, there was a bill that said, hey, we're going to create this beehive development, I think is what they called it, where the state would be over all of that. The state would be over all the development. Well, that bill didn't pass. And so this year, our governor just did an executive order doing the same thing. Nope, we're doing it anyway. And so we've got some problems where some people think that they can fix it, but they messed up the high density housing. So we've got to come to better.
And the state needs to look at is if you really want to create low-income housing where people can actually afford, first-time home buyers can afford it, they need to go out and actually look at the numbers and not just the location. Right now, when they zone stuff, all they care about is their city map, their city location. They don't care what the land costs. It's not my problem. That's the developer's problem. That's the end user's problem, right? I want the city to look like this. And they get this picture in their head, and they will not vary from it. As a home builder, it was the hardest thing ever to work with cities, and just to get them to rezone something or zone something better, and we go to them and say, look, the hard cost in this, if we can't develop here, where I could probably transfer my land and development cost to the homeowner at maybe $17,000 to $30,000 per townhouse or per condo. Mm-hmm. If you force me to build over there, it's going to be $70,000, $80,000 in just land and development costs per house per condo.
Right.
You just priced everybody out.
Right.
Just
right.
because you're zoning, you just priced everybody out.
Right. Right.
So you're completely defeating the entire purpose of this because you're too stubborn with
your master plan.
Your pretty little master plan. And that's what it boils down to.
Well, and so more people need to be coming to the table to talk about it, because I think there's people that see, they want to put in a 5-story apartment complex right next to the freeway, right? But it's not just the land that we're competing for. We also have some water issues, right? They're going to build I think we just got a federal grant for $1 billion to help the Great Salt Lake. But a lot of our land is being taken up by data centers. We have 40 of them, and they're growing. The information on who made the deal with tax incentives and things like that, they sign an NDA. So we don't even know what property tax those places are using. They're using huge amounts of land. And I think because the way technology runs, and especially nowadays, it's not like your phone that is outdated after a year. I think it's going to be the AI expansion is going to make some of these data centers less popular. They're talking about putting data centers in space where it's cold, because some of them are using 6 to 9 million gallons of water a day to cool their servers. This is from a Salt Lake Tribune article.
I understand that's old though. The old technology used that water. The new because I've been speaking to some people we're going to have on the podcast, and that they don't use those amounts of water, because that's why I want to have somebody come on and tell us the deets on what's really going on here.
Right. The newer closed systems don't use as much, but the legislature mandated water meters on secondary water before they even asked the data centers how much water they're using a day. And it was Jill Coford passed a bill this last legislative session that said, let us know what that data is, but we'll keep it anonymized. Well, I don't see how that's helpful when only the legislature gets to decide how much someone is using. I think that information, especially if they're using taxpayer funds, but through incentives, that information needs to be public, because if they're using a ton of water and a ton of energy, I think it's going to affect our energy bills soon as well. But
I would just hope that they do exactly what Trump is telling them to do. If you're using the water, if you're using the power, you have to pay for 100%.
My understanding is that they are paying for it, and that we will be
doesn't get
paid well.
redistributed. Are you saying that these data centers, that where they're building and how they're building, that's all concealed? Nobody knows where it's
Well,
happening.
we know where they are. Some of them we don't know, but there's 40 of them, and it's growing in Utah. But they take farmland. They take land that can be used for housing. They're given tax incentives. They say, oh, it will bring jobs. Well, the majority of those jobs are for building it, and then it can be maintained by a skeleton crew that just watches the servers and things like that.
Well,
So
it's still a massive amount of tax base that's coming into the state. And I'm not necessarily against the data centers. And there's lots of land in the state where they could build those where it doesn't interfere on future development, right? I mean, I've always said the same thing when it comes to both nuclear as well as the data centers. We have a West I-80 corridor going out to
Nowhere, Nevada.
going out to Nevada that there's plenty of space out there. You could build a nuclear facility out by Energy Solutions out there, and you could build data centers all down that freeway and not harm anybody.
right.
And
Well,
they could
it's-
pay for their own power. They could pay for their own water.
Right, but we don't have the data. They're not even asking for the data. That's the problem, is we don't even know what those numbers are because nobody's asking those questions. I think we just need a shift. I think there's a lot
Are
of
there policies forcing them to not disclose that, or
there's policies that they don't have to. And the legislature isn't even asking. So I was in a committee meeting this last legislative session where they were opening up within a certain range around the inland port. If there were data centers within the inland port, then they could automatically access more water. And I asked them, I said, can you just find out before you give them access to more what the amount is that they're already using? And that was my only plea. Find out what this is before you give them more. And a gentleman made comments after me that says it's not that much. And they're like, okay, it's not that much.
That's
But
not
that's
good
not data. That's not good enough for me. Not that much is
I
relative.
could see your point there. That's not good enough.
Right. We just need people who are, I'm sorry, I'm a little nerdier, so I'm going to look at the data.
Well, yeah, they should be building in the inland port anyway. The inland port is for importers and commerce and all that kind of stuff to take advantage of that land and grow our economy. It's not for a static data center. The data centers need to be out more outlying out there somewhere else that's not going to affect us at all.
Yeah.
But is going to bring revenue to the economy. I mean, I'm all for that.
Right. But what is that revenue? We don't even know that either. So
You're giving me some good questions to ask.
yeah, please
not
do.
divulging the data.
I'll email you all my questions.
Let's do it.
So let's go back to how you thought of and started to run. So how did that decision get made?
So I ran for House District 17 2 years ago, and I won at convention, and then I didn't win in the primary. I was asked to run against Stuart Adams, and I was really uncomfortable with it. It's not something that I was seeking to do. It was something that someone proposed it to me. I said, let me see if I can find someone else who will run. I made phone calls. And then it came down to the good bills dying in the Senate. And then when I had made that decision, people came out of the woodwork to say, thank you so much for running. I can't tell you how much I support you, because I can't tell you, because if I do, then the president of the Senate there's going to be some retribution for that. It's been incredible how many people have come out and said, we really support you. I think Stuart Adams didn't have anybody run against him, I think 4 years ago, or it was one person. So having three other Republicans sign up to run against him, I think is an indicator too that there's something going on here.
I
that needs
have
to
had
change.
some delegates, though, that are upset and saying it's just going to split the vote, and they really want Adams out, and they really wished that the good other ones would come together, come to a consensus, and become one and decide who's going to be that one. And because they're afraid that it's just going to split the vote amongst conservatives.
Sure. And conversations are being had. I think that is the most important thing, is that a clear message is sent that there's a front runner, and and Stuart Adams needs to we just need a change.
Because I've been really disappointed hearing from off camera so many people, and up at the Capitol, many people have told me about the intimidation and the bullying that goes on. And, you know, he denies that. And I know that a lot of people who know Stuart more intimately, that, you know, friendly, he's a nice guy. That's great. But the same thing we were talking about, that's not important about whether you like somebody's personality or what have you. But when you're telling people that if they don't vote the way you want them to vote, that every bill that they run after this is going to be killed, and there's the retribution that happens. And you can't be hearing that from so many people and not have some validity to it.
Right. Well, and seeing what happened with the auditor's office and looking at it on its face, it looks like retribution. And that's not okay, because that is our watchdog. That office is the one that is supposed to be uncovering and just checking to make sure everything's okay. And we should want more of that. And I think on its face, it looks terrible to punish the person that keeps us in line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the main reason why we're interviewing you and we're interviewing Braden Hess and these others, because I think out of all these Senate and House races in the state right now, this is the most important one, for the strict reason that Stuart Adams is the Senate president. It's the position that he holds, it's the power he holds, which makes this race by far the most important race in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if he is not elected in, then the Senate's going to elect a new president, and that could be any senator in the state. So it will shift that power greatly. Complete power shift there. And then once the new president is selected, then the entire leadership, all of it shifts. So there's a lot of cronyism going on right there. There's a lot of, we got power and authority, and they're holding everybody else back. Like she was saying, we've spoken to a lot of people off camera, off microphone, about what they're trying to do to redo the entire leadership. And there's some real, I'm not going to outline them because they'll just spoil them, but there's plans of people throughout Utah County, Salt Lake County, even farther south that I've spoken to that says, no, this is our exact plan to completely redo the entire leadership. But the only way any of that works is if Stuart Adams loses this election.
Well, and let's just talk about the effect he had on the caucus this year. I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether to call it criminal or call it genius, call it devious or genius, but we know that he held how to become a candidate, how to become a delegate trainings the Thursdays and Fridays prior to caucus. And I thought it was interesting when I saw the invites, because he's never struck me as anybody who has ever cared a thing about the delegates. He doesn't come and speak to the delegates. He doesn't come to debates, and he never talks one-on-one to his constituents unless it's a promo or putting on some sort of campaign ad. And so I thought, well, that's strange. I sent it to a few people. You find this strange? I said, I'm smelling something nefarious. And then, lo and behold, that they all came with the exact same paperwork from those trainings. And we had the mass amount of absentee ballots with the same names and the same handwriting on top that I noticed because I was a precinct chair. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know. I went looking through my rules, and I didn't know what to do about it. I'm going to disclose that in our precinct, people came with little stacks, and when they set them down, I said, you're only allowed 3 absentee ballots outside of your household. And absentee ballots were meant for, the wording on the party laws, what did that state? They kind of were saying, like, if you're on oxygen, you're serving in the military, they're on a mission, what have you. It wasn't meant to be, go get all the people who don't participate in caucus.
Don't want to show up that night.
And tell them, hey, we're going to run these people who want to keep Stuart in office. These people promised to do that. Will you sign this? And bring all those absentee ballots. And when I questioned that they could only have 3 of those, they just called up other people, other members of the precinct who had already been credentialed and were seated, and handed them to them. And that's when I went, and I was short a secretary and a treasurer at this meeting because she'd had surgery. So I've got just my vice chair, who's my husband, helping, do people, and credential people, and I am conducting the meeting. So I'm running in my rules, trying to go like, can you say, you can't hand them out to other, but I thought they'll just say, no, I wanted to, or she's carrying, I thought they can come up with something. So
Yeah.
I just let it go. But that's just not what the caucus system's about. That's not what precinct meetings are for.
I recommend anybody who witnessed that to report to chair.davisgop.org and ask to be interviewed. I think that if it hasn't started already, an investigation
I know
needs to
people
start,
in my
because it's not okay.
area, we wrote affidavits of what we saw in our particular meetings.
Okay, well, the rest of us need to get some guts and do something about it at the convention. I do have some significant issues with that, because they're already going outside of the caucus, and then to send people that don't understand the caucus convention system to come in and be delegates. A lot of them, I know delegates that have collected signatures for candidates, and I have a problem with that, because they are all, the person that you're collecting signatures for is already on the ballot. There's two systems, whether you like it or not. Allow people some representation instead of, I'm glad that they came to caucus, and I hope that the outcome is that they get more information.
I assume Stuart's collecting signatures or collected signatures.
Yes, I think he's pretty close.
I didn't know that.
He did get his, yeah.
Yeah, but if I'm going to play devil's advocate, which I like to do a lot against myself, I can see him saying, well, you wanted me to be part of the caucus and you want me to be part of the delegates, so I did.
And that's fine, because they're going to get educated, and they're going to go to these events where there's, I've held events. I know that the Davis County Conservatives invited Stuart Adams and quite a few candidates, and they haven't shown. I think there's
and the signature gatherers did not show to those debates where people could directly ask them questions.
Yeah, I think it's...
And we have invited Stuart to be on this podcast for months, and he's actually agreed to, and we go setting dates, and it just kind of never comes to fruition.
Yeah, I have seen him hold a town hall in, I think it was a couple of years ago, and he took a softball question, spoke about it for 20 minutes, and then said, okay, that's all I have time for, and left. So that was, I think that's a tactic.
Perfect.
That it's my opportunity to campaign and not take the hard questions, because there are some hard questions over there. In 2023, there was an article that came out by the AP saying that there was some undue Chinese influence in our legislature. And I thought, no, that's not right. So I popped over to le.utah.gov and I typed in China, and up popped the search resulted in a Senate concurrent resolution from 2016 celebrating our 10-year commitment, our 10-year relationship with our sister city in China. And I'm like, what? When did we get a sister city in China? Well, 2006. And that's when the dual immersion with Chinese schools started. And I think it's great to learn another culture and another language, because it makes us...
Why do we have a sister city does everybody have a sister city? Is it like a pen pal thing? Like, what is this, and why China? Why isn't it New Zealand or,
Yeah, it's more than a pen pal thing, because the students in those dual immersion schools sent letters to Xi Jinping, their grandpa. Oh, he's like a grandpa. He's so awesome. I'm going to keep my opinion out of that. The part that was concerning to me is this, in that video, and I can put it on my website, votejengarner.com. It talks about the other things that this agreement has brought in. It brought $50 million. So this was 2016, a while ago. It brought in $50 million from China that China had invested into Utah. Well, where did that go? I'd like to know. And then the most shocking thing to me was that they would collaborate on legislation, that another country would have influence on our... It says legislation, and I about passed out. Because I thought, why are we taking legislation, and what legislation is it? And they talked about sending a sending a delegation to China one year, and then the following year China would return. And so this yearly relationship, how long has it continued? When was the last time that they met? I think this kind of stuff.
Why is the state involved in foreign policy? Period. We should be doing.
And then we
anything
had
like
all
that.
the land they were owning.
I get upset when senators and U.S. senators and U.S. House representatives go out there and start visiting other countries. What are you doing traveling to other countries? That's not your purview.
I know.
Foreign policy is the President of the United States and his cabinet, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not on my website yet, but if you search, you can't search China anymore because they buried the lead on that. So it's Liaoning, China. That's our sister city. And I would just like to know what legislation came from there. And that opens it up to all this legislation, right? What legislation comes from foreign countries? I think that needs to be transparent for citizens so that we know who's influencing our legislators. Trade, okay, I understand, because
And this is why we need to be involved and why citizens can't say it. I don't like to be involved in politics. You're part of it. This is a country where we have representative government. If you want a place where you don't have to be involved, there are socialist and communist countries and communities to live in. This isn't
You don't have to be involved at all there.
You have to do the bare minimum.
right. And the therapy is to do something about it, because the more that you see, the more that it's confusing, the more you think, what is going on? And the only thing to do is to be involved, is to do something about it. I totally agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing. I love what Braden's doing. I want to see you both do incredibly well at convention, but we all know it's going to go to primary. So after convention, after we have that, and we know that, hopefully Stuart Adams isn't the one elected in convention, and it goes to primary and through the signature process, that whoever comes out of convention, you guys unite, get all your electorate behind whoever wins that, and it's just a full court press at that point to make sure Stuart doesn't get in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competition, but a different tactic, because Stuart has all the money that he wants. He can send out any amount of flyers saying whatever he wants over and over again every single day if he wants to. My intent is to make that personal connection with every voter, every Republican voter, and tell them why we have an issue and why it needs to change, and they need to vote for someone different in the primary.
You know, I'm going to bring up another point. So in my area, I feel like my precinct was an embarrassment, but I was not alone.
You were not alone.
We were not alone in our area. I don't know why our area in Davis County, that's supposed to be one of the most conservative counties in the area, has this kind of liberal influence in our party. But what I'm worried about is now you have all these delegates, haven't seen them at one debate because they already know who they're going to vote for. They've already been bought. Mm-hmm. They don't come to hear anything you have to say. And I'm sure hoping that these other areas don't have the kind of delegates that we have coming out of our precinct. Or he'll win from the delegate vote too.
Right. Well, there's also write-in campaigns. There's a lot of things that we can do. That we're just not going to give up.
Then they'll just get Ben Affleck's Jennifer Garner to also run. So then it would confuse the names, and you'd have two Garners, and then they can say she officially dropped out.
Yeah, and that did happen actually when I ran before. Someone spread that I was from California, and I thought, well, that was
They did not.
repentance. Sorry. There's some things that need to be a little more transparent on all of that.
Our sweet citizens get so easily duped.
Well, we discussed what you were just talking about. I don't know if you watched our podcast from last week with
Natalie Clausen and Phil Lyman.
Right.
And how the other Lyman got put on his write-in ballot and was paid $1,000 by the Caucus campaign.
He got a steak dinner too.
And a steak dinner to come in his write-in campaign to confuse the audience.
I hate that it was steak because I love steak. I hate that it was steak. It should have been like...
We're not going to let it taint the steak.
Yeah. Nope, we got to keep it. We got to redefine steak.
Well, let's kind of get into, again, how you made that decision. We kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah.
But what was the ultimate thing that kind of tipped you over the edge and said, no, I'm going to do it?
Well, there were a few things. There was watching legislation over the past 6 years where good bills go to die, knowing how many of these bills that were pushed by the Senate, that actually made it through the Senate and were pushed through the House too. For instance, the down payment assistance program. We already have down payment assistance programs, but the bill that Stuart Adams pushed said, here's $50 million of taxpayer funds, but we are going to, and you can use it, but only on new properties and only with these builders. I think that's a problem. That's a big problem. So it's a pipeline over and over, and it's not just one pipeline, but they've all been funneled into pockets of special interests. And
So it sounds like this generous thing to the uneducated voter.
Yeah.
Well, how where does it say on there that it's only filtered for a specific number of builders?
It's in the bill. I think it was, I forget the name of the bill, but I spoke to that too, because I said, all this is going to do is keep the prices high for the builders that are already there, because the way that it was written, and it hadn't been adjusted yet, and they said that they would adjust it, was that I can't remember the language, but it made it a double incentive for home builders, and they cut it down to half, but it still is new builds, and it had to be over, or it couldn't be more than a certain amount. But it's not the only puzzle piece that comes together. It's the infrastructure districts, it's the low income financing. And let's say that the affordable housing is the 40%, right? Well, it's the Section 8 housing is still another bucket of taxpayer funds. So it's using taxpayer funds to get more taxpayer funds. And I think that we really need to break that open and look at that kind of result and talk about the data. The other reason why I was running is I watched the legislation that went into personal protections for a family member that instead of talking about that, I'm going to talk about the two. When I was growing up, if there were teenagers that did married stuff, things that happened in marriage, G-rated way to say it, right? Then as long as they were within 2 years, they were considered peers, and it wasn't considered a sexual offense.
Within 2 years of each other's age.
2 years of each other. 2011, that changed to 4 years. And then this last legislature, or in 2024, it changed to 4 years plus if you were still in high school. So 18 and still in high school, even if your victim was 4 years younger. Yeah. So I think we've done a great disservice to a lot of kids, because had we kept it at that 2 years, and that's my intent, is to get back to the 2 years. If there's that kind of behavior that's happening, we can catch it and resolve it before either of them become adults, before either of them continue in that kind of abuse. And legislating for one, I think, is wrong. We need to be legislating to protect the most people.
Huh?
Yeah, I was surprised at how little news it got, but I know why that incident didn't get a lot of news, because it was a female perpetrating onto a male. And if it was a male perpetrating onto a female, that would have made national news.
I don't think that was the only reason either.
Yeah, but that's why
I think our current media, our local media, is very beholden to our Senate
that could be
president.
part of it too.
Well, there's some whispering, and maybe it's probably gossip. I shouldn't say anything, but someone was trespassed from the Capitol for writing something negative about Senator Adams. And I will confirm that, and I will put it on my website, because I think that's also...
that seems to follow suit with the things that we've heard.
But here, it's the First Amendment right? Like, there's a lot of things that the Salt Lake Tribune says that I don't like, but they're still doing an important job, and sometimes they're right on, and it's a time that
I'd like
people
to see
need
that.
to be...
haven't seen it.
Oh, I've seen some. But it does get buried because of our legislature.
Well, and I've said on a previous podcast, in my circles, I have spoken to some journalists who say, I can't write those stories. Mine won't get published. And they want to have a great career. So they know how they have to write the article in order to be the one that gets to be published.
Yeah. So if you're a conservative journalist and you can't do any work, then you
either have to move to Florida,
right?
or...
Right. I think that type of intimidation is absolutely making it so that less people are willing to step up and and talk about things that we absolutely need to be
But
talking
on a
about.
positive note, more and more people are starting to speak out. And I think the more of us that speak out and the more of you that speak out,
More of you that share this podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you know, Tina Cannon and the Abbotts and those who are getting bullied up at the Capitol, you make more people more brave.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing something very important that can't be shut down because someone doesn't have power over you. And that's when it's most important to stand up. So I really, really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, if we can get past YouTube, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause,
Well,
anything that's conservative, they could care less. We're talking about state politics or national politics or world politics, which we do all three. But because it's conservative, it gets massive suppression. And people really don't understand how bad it is. So just to give you an idea, and I've said this before, but I like people to hear it over and over again. So when we put out a video, YouTube will tell you exactly how many impressions they'll give you on that YouTube video. Because we got over 20,000 subscribers, but we'll get maybe 600 impressions total that YouTube will give us. Like, that's it. They won't even give us 1,000 impressions.
wow.
And then, so unless we pay to actually get it sponsored out there, they won't do it. But to show you how ridiculous this is, because we don't promote much. I'll put $100 into it, each video to promote a little bit. The second I put $100 on it, we'll be over 10,000 views. So normally it costs a lot more in promotional money to get 10,000 views, but it goes to show how much people want to see it and want to click on it if it was put in front of them.
Right.
But the only way we can get it in front of people is through paying for it, because YouTube won't do it naturally. And yet, if I was talking about kittens or video games or anything else like that, I'd get 100,000 natural impressions. But they're just not doing it here, which is why we need the audience to put us out
Yes.
there, because 600 impressions is ridiculous when you've got 20,000 subscribers and your videos are getting 10,000 views off of $100.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. I agree. Another reason why I decided to run was Prop 4. The repeal of Prop 4.
Let's talk about Prop
Yeah.
4.
So outside interests pushed it in the beginning in 2018. Outside interests paid signature gatherers to repeal it. Outside money came to get people to remove their signatures. I think that paying people, when you pay people to gather a signature, they're going to say whatever they want to get that signature. And a lot of times it's not. They don't understand the issue. They don't understand that this is a judge making a decision on what Utah should look like and not our legislature, which goes against our Constitution. I think there were some opportunities to fix this issue between now and 2018, and the legislature didn't take that up. And I think the next step is impeachment of that judge. And I would like the legislature to get their guts and put them together and go ahead and censure that judge. And I do wonder why it hasn't happened already. If it hasn't happened because they're okay with it, like, I'd like to know more. I mean, I was out there collecting packets of signatures myself, but I wanted people to be informed. They'd come up, they'd say, I'm here to sign us, and I would ask, do you have any questions? And some of them did. And so I'd spend the 10-15 minutes explaining how we got here and how this is how we get out of it. But people removing their signatures in certain areas, they've put tons of money to do that. And so it has failed.
Well, people don't understand that how much George Soros and DNC, national DNC money, went into better boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what they want. They want to take back the House. They do not want Trump to have his way for the next 2 years. They want to incapacitate him, make him a lame duck president for his last 2 years by taking away at least the House, right? Because we're all pretty confident we're not going to lose the Senate. But they know that they can't, through just sheer election, win the House back through sheer votes. It's just not possible. What they have to do is they have to project onto us what they themselves are doing, which are gerrymandering districts. They use the whole Texas thing as an excuse to gerrymander Utah, to gerrymander California, to try to pick up House seats instead of confiding the electorate and letting people pick their districts how their constitutions allow them to. They said, no, we're not going to allow that. we need to get those House seats back at whatever cost is necessary. And so now we have this little donut hole in Utah where you look at that map and you look at all previous maps in the state for the history of the state. It's always been kind of a bike spokes, where everybody's had a part of the city, part of rural, and part military, and the legislators, the senators have been forced to represent all walks of life in the state.
Right.
But now they're purposely selecting their electorate who they want to represent. I only want to represent these people because they know they can get a Democrat seat out of it, and that's what happened. And so I blame this completely on Utahns, because Utahns are ignorant. They just don't pay attention. Someone comes up to them, oh, you did this, and they start accusing you of something, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I can take my name off of that. And we lost this whole proposition down in Salt Lake, but we didn't lose it in the Democrat part of Salt Lake, which is where we knew we were going to lose it anyway. We lost it in the conservative area. I mean, Draper, Sandy,
Yeah.
Riverton or Riverdale down there. That's where we lost it. That's the heavy Republican side of the county, and yet that's where we lost it. So people got fooled into taking their signatures off, got shamed into taking their signatures off. The whole mailer that was sent out, where they accused us of gerrymandering, of us taking control away from the voter. Well, that's the projection. That is the rhetoric where they project on us what they themselves are doing, because they're the only ones that gerrymandered. They're the only ones that took the vote out. And it's the same thing with SB 54, right? Because everybody uses SB 54 and puts this story out there that says, look, if we put this out to a primary, if we put this out, you, the voter, get to decide. You're the ones deciding. If you guys only let a delegate do it, then the delegate's taking your vote away, right? Delegate's taking your power. Delegate's taking your authority. And they accuse a delegate of doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, it's just the opposite of that. The reason why delegates work is because it puts more power to an individual. When you have the population size that we have, it takes thousands of us to influence one legislator or one senator, because they can ignore a couple hundred of us and not affect their electorate at all. I don't care what you think. And it completely disenfranchises you because they don't care. When you go up there and you start reclaiming to your senator, your House representative, and say, I want you to change this. He says, I don't care what your opinion is.
Right.
One person is not going to make any difference to me.
Right.
But when you have a group of people get behind a delegate and they make sure that delegate represents their values, when a delegate calls a senator or House representative, the senator or the House representative pays attention. Why? Because they know that one person represents 40 others, 50 others. And then when delegates get together and you have 10 delegates reclaiming, now you're several hundred people in a few. That's power. That's power that cannot be ignored. Whereas 10 citizens going up and reclaiming, I don't care what you guys think.
That's why they're starting at the grassroots is what they're doing. I don't know if you were there I'm sure you were at the County Central Committee meeting that was in Bountiful High or somewhere down on there recently. So as you were credentialing in, we had the signature table there to repeal, which was great because then we didn't have to go anywhere else. So we're signing it. We go to credential and my husband goes, this guy, he goes, listen to this guy. He says that's the wrong packet. Like there was something nefarious. He says to go take your name off. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he says, yeah. He goes, that one's for gerrymandering, whatever. So I walk back over to the table where I've already signed, read it. And I'm like, no, that's the correct. So they were doing it right there.
Wow.
So I go in and we've chosen this person as a volunteer. Volunteers come, I'll help credential people. How many more of them in there were like that? So I go in and I'm like, what is happening here? So I'm texting, my representative and other people, the leadership. And I think Trevor Lee was the only one who could get, because I think the rest of you guys were like not on your phones. You're busy getting ready to start the meeting. And so he's like, who is he? Where is he? We go back out. He's gone.
Oh, yeah.
And then, but he's got to be that same group that when they were collecting signatures for that, they always had the hecklers there. So people were like, I was at the Kohl's and I was signing to repeal, and there were people there yelling, you know, no, this is a trick, and what have you. So they started the confusion from before.
They did, and we probably ought to ask Blake Moore who his volunteer was, because he was part of the Better Boundaries.
That's right.
He might have this person's contact information. I don't know. I think the result of Prop 4, if Blake Moore was honest about him wanting people to be more represented, then he needs to run in his own district. He needs to run in that district that he created.
I like it.
That's exactly what Carrie Ann said last week. Is what make him go run in his own district now, District 1. I'm all for that. I mean, if he can, I mean, he's still Republican. If he can win in the now Democrat district, I am all for it.
He's still registered Republican.
I'd rather have him in District 1 now than somebody else, but I don't want him up here.
Yeah, I really wonder if he gave his seat away, and that would just be a result of working with the Better Boundaries. That it was not Better Boundaries. I think we're being targeted nationwide because we're so nice, because we think, oh, I can't tell this person no, so I'll sign what they want. And I think the culture needs to flip, where you read something before you sign it. Even if you're a senator, and then, especially if you're voting for something. The initiative process they created to be very difficult, and then the legislature ended up needing this very difficult process to help them. But if we take the two types of petitions, there's a candidate petition, and there's the initiative or referendum petition. So if I'm running for office and I'm running statewide, I only need 28,000 signatures. And then I'm on the primary ballot. I don't have to go to caucus. I'm already on the primary ballot. For an initiative, though, it's like this last time we had to collect 160, something like 160,000 signatures. So they've purposely made it difficult. The other thing about a petition for a candidate is that information is not public. So when my neighbor signs, they have 3 days from the day that it's submitted to take their name off of the candidate petition, but they have no idea when the candidate's going to submit that. And so are they supposed to call every single day to have their name removed? Nobody's going to do that. Nobody has time for that. But if it's on a petition for an initiative or for some initiative, then there's 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's 45 days.
Yeah, where people can have their name removed, and it's public, so everybody in the whole wide world gets to get your information and and figure out where you are. Do a phone
mailing list from you and mail it to you. That's what they
show
did.
up at your door, find your phone number, and tell you what you've done is wrong. And so you have the masses coming against you to take your name off of a petition, but yet you're protected if you sign for a candidate. And I think that needs to probably, if that protection is going to be for the candidate, it needs to be for the petition process too. If it's going to be for that initiative and referendum, or they give them privacy too, or neither of them have privacy. I think we've got some disparity there.
I would agree
That's
with
a good point.
I would agree with that. So let's get to some big topics of what's going to what's happening in the state right now, what you're going to try to accomplish as a senator, what's happened in the past that's not so good, and what we need to do to change it. We've talked about Prop 4. We've talked about SB 54. A lot of the other things that's happening up in the state-wise is looking actually really, really good. We've had a lot of stuff that's getting passed, but the House tends to do their job, and the Senate tends to water everything down. So all our LGBTQ initiatives, all our pornography in schools, and all this other kind of stuff gets watered down. The tech in schools, that gets watered down. So it's like where we have a great house, And you'd think it'd be just the opposite of that because of how many people are in the House. You have to have a lot more people to come together as like mind to get something passed. And yet we're doing it well there amongst a lot of people. But when we have a finite number of people in the Senate, we can't get it done. We can't get anything done. So let's start with kind of the whole LGBTQ thing. So recently they passed where LGBTQ people couldn't be in locker rooms, school bathrooms, or anything else like that in the universities and stuff. But they're still trying to bypass that a little bit in the University of Utah and other areas. We're still hearing reports of kitty litters for the furries going on in some of our schools. Kind of go through what's your goals there and what you would like to see happen statewide.
Yeah, this is a big question. I think once people are adults, then first of all, women's spaces need to be protected. Even as adults. Before they're adults, we have a responsibility to keep our youth from having all of the, like, they're youth. They're not supposed to be dealing with adult issues. I think these are adult issues. And I think the left didn't even bother to look at what kinds of books were being pushed into our elementary schools, because I thought, I hear book banning. No, we're never going to book ban. That's what they did in Nazi Germany, and we're not Nazis. But if you looked at those books, they were absolutely grotesque. And if I had them in my home, and if anybody who was divorced had one of those books in their home and the other spouse found out about it, they would have their kids taken away for moral turpitude. Like, they are bad. Cartoon porn is still porn. And I just wish that people would really look at those books, even though they're gross. They're just so disgusting, and they should not be in our schools, bottom line, but I also don't think that they need to be in our county libraries. If somebody wants to buy that crap, let them buy that crap. Our taxpayer dollars should not be going towards that at all.
Yeah, I don't think you see why it should be in a public library, city public library, county public library. Shouldn't be anywhere in there, particularly not in the children's section, because they're allowing that stuff in the children's section. And I think what's happening is left and right, if it's obviously pornographic and stuff like that, they'll say, oh yeah, let's get rid of that, we're fine. But if there's anything that has to do with LGBTQ, it gets a pass. It's just like a hard pass. We're not going to touch this. We're going to let it slide. So there's it's a kind of the same thing that's going on when we're prosecuting people like Hillary Clinton and others. It's two levels of prosecution, right? It's
right.
Everybody should be adhering to the same law. The law should be the same across the board, but yet some people get favoritism, some people don't. And when it comes to these type of materials, if it's normal heterosexual pornography, then yeah, we have no problems kicking that out. But if it's LGBTQ related, it's like no one's going to touch it. We're going to let this thing pass.
Well, it's unfortunate that some of these stories can't be written without completely inappropriate materials. That's the thing is, I have family members that are gay. Some of my favorite people are gay. Shout out to Gowd. But I think that that's not what the issue is. This information, these kinds of materials that retweak brains that are still developing is absolutely irresponsible. And the teeth were missing, and the teeth need to be put in those bills. I think that there's members of the school board that would appreciate not having to be the heavy. The legislature needs to be the heavy. I do appreciate that Senator Brammer and Senator Bramble brought the Davis school board in to discuss some of these materials, and they put up on a projector some of the excerpts from, I think this one was the Freedom Writers Journal, and they asked them, will you please read this? And none of them would read it. And then the chair of the school board said, well, I wouldn't have this in my class, but it's in our classes. It's in our classes. And the process that was created that allowed for parents to object ended up getting the Bible pulled off of shelves in Davis School District. And I don't think kids were checking out the Bible at their school library. That was not happening. But it embarrassed Utah on across the world, not just across the states.
Yeah, national conservatives are like, what the heck is going on in Utah? What are you people doing?
Right. And I think there's also a tendency to pass a bill, to say that you passed a bill, and then, we'll fix it later, and that fix never comes. I think we need to slow things down, pass good bills, instead of saying, hey, I passed 18 bills, or hey, Trevor Lee didn't pass any bills this last session because of this. I think we need less, not more. If we need to be slowing things down, let's do. The other thing about Trevor is they give him the hard bills and he has the guts to run them, and then they don't pass him that legislation or that legislative session, but then they pass him the next one, like this last one, the bell-to-bell ban on phones. He ran that 2 years ago. So they have him do the dirty work. They send him out in a sacrificial manner, and then they pass it a few years later. So they're just, I feel like they're using him, and they really should cut him some slack.
Well, it's a smart way to use him, right? Because he's brave enough to do it, which is why we all love Trevor doing that. But they know for a fact that it's going to take a while to persuade minds in both the legislature and the House, or in the Senate. Why is that? We're supposed to be in a very, very conservative state. Why are we struggling to have conservative values stick? There's a conservative effort out there to specifically attack children.
Absolutely.
I don't know why that's so hard to get into the heads of our legislators, that no matter what you should be doing, you should be protecting kids. Okay, I mean, there's freedom of speech. There's adults going to have their freedom to do whatever it is that they want to do. I am of that belief. If you want to get married, if you want to live together, whatever you want to do, go for it. But the second you start talking about kids, I'm done. You shouldn't be. I love the law where they are not going to allow LGBTQ people to be anywhere near kids in the medical sphere for more than 5 minutes. And I think that one passed. I don't think LGBTQ people should be allowed to adopt, because you're affecting someone else's child. It's not your DNA. You want to go have a child the natural way, go for it. I can't say anything about that, but I don't think they should be allowed to adopt at all. And there's a lot of really, really conservative things not making it through a conservative Utah. And we're supposed to be like, I mean, not to bring too much religion in this, but because of our LDS background, we should be like the most conservative state out there. And yet we're the ones that are struggling to have anything Christian out there. I mean, Kansas is kicking our trash. Iowa's kicking our trash. Florida's kicking our trash when it comes to conservative values.
Yeah, I think some of that comes from being in a bubble and not having our standards tested at all. And then we elect people that we think we can trust, and then we don't follow up on that because politics are toxic. I think that we also have some issues with our food. Spinach used to have 70% more iron in it, and then nowadays, because they're not moving the growth of that to different areas, the farming isn't being rotated like it's supposed to. And so even our spinach, like Popeye, we are not Popeye spinach people anymore, right? Because we're not getting the iron that we need from our food. And I think that is also on purpose. I think it's everywhere we look, it is meant to exhaust us. I work with several people. I have people on a team that are following. I think it's impossible to do everything on your own. It's impossible to know everything on your own. So it's important to bring in people with different perspectives that are experts in their fields to inform ourselves on these different aspects. Schools are a big thing. I pulled my kids in 2020. I said, if you're all going to go on laptops anyway, I can do that from home. I saw some research that was done that said kids learn for 11 minutes a day, and then the rest of it's socialization. So I'm like, well, I can socialize at home. I've got 3 kids. We've got great family members. We've got a great community.
Groups for things.
Yep, there's halftime stuff. And so my kids just didn't go back. And I think that being not involved in that, I've watched the awful stuff that has happened from 1,000-foot level instead of on the ground. But I still have people on a team that I talk to. Okay, what's going on with schools? How did this happen? And I think it's important to not just think that you know everything. And I think we have legislators that are afraid to look weak, and it's not weakness when you're willing to be able to take in more information to make better decisions.
You know, I have a daughter that homeschools, and she was just recently showing me, no, I don't want to digress there, but she was showing me the curriculum and the books. Like we're going to go back to textbooks in K through 3 or K through 4? K through 3?
K through 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to be preemptive because they're looking at the textbooks that we use. Who owns that company? Why do we choose that company? And when you trace it back, it's Hollywood that owns this company. And it's some dark,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to have Liz Jenkins from Child First Policy Center come in and discuss this with us, because she shared some research with me on where the textbooks come from and what's in there.
Who
So
owns McGraw-Hill? You shared that
Right.
video with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awful. Yeah. I think AI is going to have an effect on that too, especially with robot coming out with our first lady saying, "Hey, here's your teacher." I think that that's very dangerous. I did attend the governor's conference on AI, and I was in one of the breakout sessions sitting next to someone else that's an educator, and she said, "Oh, well, I use AI to create my coursework, and I use it for my executive functioning." And I said, "Well, you just AI'd yourself out of a job." She's like, No. All my students can't use AI to answer these questions." And I said, "Why do I need to take your class if I can AI your class?" And that's when it stuck that
That's what
I
that's
have
supposed to happen.
just AI'd myself out of a job. There was another youth in that meeting that she was asked, "Well, what do you use AI for?" And she said, "Oh, I ask it what I should do when I hang out with my friends." So I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, where you had to grow your imagination if you didn't want to be bored all day. After school, during the summer, we like hosed down a big dirt hole and slid in and out of it. And AI is not going to tell you to do that. It's not going to tell you to find an abandoned train car. And we have given away our imagination to AI. And it scares me what kind of future we're looking at if we have no critical thinking, no ways of looking at things in a different way to solve issues. And I think that moving things into this AI companion, especially when there's cases across the United States where AI told them, "Come live with me, it's better," and these kids have offed themselves. I think that's very concerning. I think that keeping the human touch inside of all of those things is more important than chasing AI and where it's going to take us. I think that we're chasing evil if we continue down that path.
Well, social media was invented to bring us together, to make the world smaller, which it did, but it's also pushed us farther apart because nobody's human anymore. It's just you and a screen. Nobody socializes as much anymore. Everybody's stuck behind a computer. Everybody's stuck behind a cell phone. Like you said, back in the 80s, there was a lot more socialization going out. You'd actually hang out with your friends. You'd actually pay attention to them, because you go out to bars and restaurants and all that kind of stuff, and everybody's still just looking down at their cell phones.
leave it to us humans to take
Yeah.
a great
And
invention and make bad out of it.
Then the schools are getting worse with that. And so it dehumanizes everybody. So now when you're on social media, you can call people names, you can get really evil and mean. And then when you have all these riots that go on out there, then that's why the violence is becoming more severe. That's why people are actually getting killed at a lot of these protests, these leftist protests, these Black Lives Matter protests, these No Kings protests, where people are actually getting hurt because they've been behind the cell phone and the screen for so long that humans are no longer human.
Yeah, I think it also comes from being told that words are violence.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't hear me, then you're denying my human right. And so whatever I do in response is justified. And that we have got to turn the temperature down. I have taken rhino out of my vocabulary. I don't like using that one because If that's what I'm standing on, then I can't argue the principles. I can't argue the bad bill. So I'm going to stick with that bad bill, and I'm not going to call names. But I think that we've got some leadership that does that on their own, that doesn't hesitate to call people extremists. Oh, the delegates are extremists. Well, okay, then let's talk about what you think is extreme. Because the delegates didn't shut down the economy. The delegates didn't force a vaccine on everybody. The delegates didn't force mask mandates. Like, so who's the extremist?
Keep a mask mandate in school so that you could get your federal funding.
Well, yeah, and the federal funding, so you're talking about the DEI. So the ESSER funds that were specifically for K through 12, they came with a contract that said a certain percentage of this funding has to go to DEI initiatives. So when they accepted that funding, that is when DEI just flooded in to each of those places. And it flooded into our governments, it flooded into higher ed, it flooded into anybody who took that kind of funding, that a certain percentage of it had, like the big corporations that took that funding had to.
We're pulling teeth to get it out. And the legislature the last couple of sessions has pulled it out of the universities and stuff, but we're finding that they're just rebranding it, keeping the same people and just keeping the same DEI initiatives in the schools. And
yeah, I'm hearing the same thing out of Weber from students. They said, yeah, they changed the name. You know, I brought this up a couple times, but I don't know if you've heard that so 2 instances, I have 2 students from Weber in the criminal justice. One was a senior, and she said, I just can't wait to graduate. She said, she said, for example, there was a paper I needed to, or a test I was going to take. And she said, I was trying to study for it, but I couldn't follow the case well because it would say they, them, this. And she was like, the one who was the plaintiff or the one that was like, she just couldn't follow the story to be able to answer the questions properly. So she emails her professor and says, can you put the proper verbiage in there so I can follow this? And he tells her, I wish I could. So he's saying higher above him is telling him, don't you do that, when I thought we had the mandate to take DEI out.
I work with these people. I mean, they are my colleagues. I think that many of them can't come from a place of caring and come from a place of feeling like they have been ignored or they've been unable to speak about things. I think that that some parts of our higher ed are captured, and the department that I work in shouldn't be politicized at all, because I just help people get to graduation without debt. That there shouldn't be anything politicized about that. But I also feel like anytime I make a comment, I have to defend myself, and so I can make comments as a person, but not as a person and as an employee in higher ed. There's some issues that need to be fixed, but there's some people that need to be heard. So that because when they feel heard, then we can get to an actual solution. But I agree, there's some things happening that I don't like either. I don't like the forced pronouns. I think if someone is questioning, right, because they've come up through K-12 and they're in higher ed now, and DEI has just recently been pulled back, and so now they're questioning, well, now they have to announce what their pronouns are, and I think that can be harmful. I do worry about our youth. I worry about the constant, you should be in therapy. Therapy is available. Here's where you go to seek therapy. And I think there's a point in time where all of us need to be able to work things out because of something that's happened in our head. Sure. But if you feel abnormal because you're not in therapy, I think that's a problem as well.
Well, I think there's a big problem amongst conservatives to be too accepting. We got to allow everything, accept everybody. We got to be love your neighbor type of thing. And where the left purposely uses your Christian values against you and gets you to literally accept everything. Vote in everything, love everything, accept everything. And we confuse love your neighbor with sticking to your values, right? I can love my neighbor and treat them with respect, but then stay hard and fast on, I am not bending my values. You're a great person, not going to demean you at all or anything else like that. I'll let you have your freedom, but this is wrong, and sorry, but we're not passing laws that are going to condone this. We're not allowing you near our kids. We're not allowing any type of this type of curriculum into our schools. We're not going to allow this in our bathrooms or our locker rooms. That's a hard and fast no. And again, nothing against you as being LGBTQ or anything else. You're not an evil person. I'm going to let you live your life. But I think that particularly here in Utah, and again, going to the LDS community, is they become too soft, where they start bending the values in hopes to gain the love my neighbor type of thing. And then all this is allowed into the community.
Yeah, they've misunderstood Christ's principle of, yes, he loved the sinner and put his arms around him and was with them, but he didn't tell everybody, let's model this behavior.
Right. Or that come as you are and you can stay who you are, because we all have to become better.
Yeah,
Like
we're all working to
right.
become better, so why would we want to stay who we are?
Right. And why do you go to higher ed? Why do you go to grow? And growing hurts. Can I just say growing hurts? Sometimes it absolutely hurts.
Why can't you just stick to your values and not bend and still love somebody? And that's not what people understand.
Well, and I think that the education in general, it's one of the communist tenets is to infiltrate education. But in education, they'll say, okay, we're not going to do politics at all. Well, the conservatives listen to that, but not the ones that think that they are fighting for social justice and things like that. I had a student that was in a political class watching the Charlie Kirk event live. And of course, it was shocking, and it was created some silence, and the student went to his next class with another student, and in that next class someone said, well, let's just face it, all conservatives deserve to die. And the instructor did nothing to stop that kind of conversation.
Did nothing.
We have to get back to a human level where we can disagree without hating someone.
Is that not modeling radical Muslim behavior? All Americans should die?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a prime example of this. So I was literally 2 weeks ago in my own Sunday school class at church, and obviously we're talking about morals and values, and the whole abortion topic came up, and the instructor says, well, I don't want to get political, but abortion is wrong. And I instantly raised my hand. I'm just like, sorry, that isn't political, that's moral. That is the exact problem with society right now, is you do not take a stand. You don't want to push back on morals and values. You don't want to hold people to a higher standard, and you bend because all of a sudden the left has got this rhetoric out there, got this story out there that everybody believes that abortion is a political, that LGBTQ is political, that standards are political. And if it's political, it can be taken out of society because you got to have separation of God, church and state. You have all these other separations. You can't talk about it because it gets into politics. I'm like, no. And I straight up said, I mean, everybody knows I had run a podcast, and I said, sorry, that is not political. That is moral, and that is the problem with society.
Yeah, and I think the left gets the message that we only care about that baby being born and nothing else. But that is a lie that has been really hard to catch up with, because I don't see us stopping at that. I see us worrying about, okay, are you okay with food? Are you okay with housing? Are you okay with insurance and health coverage and things like that? So I don't see that in Utah. I don't see that we're not taking care of them past birth, but there's this message that's coming to so many of them that, oh no, you don't care. Oh, Republicans are heartless. Well, and
it's working.
It is. And it's really unfortunate until we can sit down and talk to someone, talk to the people that disagree with us and find, oh, you don't believe that. But this requires effort. It requires talking about things that people don't want to talk about because it's already in their head. They already feel morally justified that they're better than someone else because they believe in taking care of people after. But I really am concerned about how many people aren't here because of abortion. But I'm also concerned about the waste, fraud, and abuse that happens in some of these other services.
Well, I've always been of the opinion, because the left loves just throwing stuff out there. That's not constitutional. Trump is doing stuff that's unconstitutional. He's deporting people. That's unconstitutional. He's bombing Iran. That's unconstitutional. It's all constitutional. But they get the 24-hour news cycle going. They get the rhetoric going. They get the one-liners going. They get the quick blurbs on social media going. And everybody falls into the trap. And I'm of the opinion, I'm like, if you're not Christian, if you don't believe a word of Christianity, you cannot use that against me. If you're coming out there and saying you're not Christian, you're not God-fearing, you're not loving your neighbor, I'm like, sorry, I don't respect a word you're saying because you don't believe a word of it. So, pound sand. I mean, you're go away. But the problem is I'm in a very, very, very small minority of people that think that way, because the vast majority of people, they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And they become very, very, very apologetic. And then they start conforming and they start bending because they don't want to be pictured or imaged as not being Christian, not being loving, or not being endearing, or being accepting, or and then you get these fake terms out there of you're not being inclusive, right? And that word inclusive has become a signature word for the left now, right? Like, because DEI, that's what it is, right? What's the
Yeah, show me how we're being inclusive of Christians. We're people of faith.
Yeah, exactly. Diversity, equity, inclusion is
diversity, equity, inclusion. So yeah, that's the inclusion word that I'm looking at, right? You're not being inclusive. You're not being inviting. And that they'll use it against you. And it's great that they use all those words, but why is the right, why is conservatives, why are Christians buying into that every single time? And we bend our values. It's not even bending our values. We break them so often in politics because we're afraid of being labeled as exclusive, not Christian, not loving.
Yeah, but our own leadership is doing that, right? Our own leadership.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
We're extremists. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's language that needs to that we need to start from a baseline where we're not labeling each other based on stuff like that.
But the left's going to label us no matter what we do. That's my point. Is their rhetoric is not going to stop. Those labels are going to be out there. There's no stopping that. So the right, we have to stand for values no matter what the labels say.
Yeah.
And that goes in our voting, that goes in our caucuses, that goes in convention. I mean, exactly what you're running for, Braden Hess is running for. We've got people in there that are afraid of those terms and are not wholeheartedly standing up for values.
Yeah, I think the new term is belonging. And of course, there's this positive connotation of that we all want to belong, right? But that means that I don't ever have to change. And I think that's a misconception. So I had this conversation with someone at my work recently, and I said, I don't belong. I don't feel like I belong, but I don't come to work to belong. I come to work to help students get to graduation. And I think I broke that person's brain. You don't feel like you belong? What am I doing that you don't feel like you belong? And I'm like, I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you to bend over backwards to make me feel like I belong, because I know who I am. This internal locus of control is where I make my decisions. I don't make my decisions based on how can I make, or if I rely on other people to make me happy, I'm never going to be happy, because man is just imperfect. I have to be able to know who I am and not depend on what other people think about me, because that will never serve me. That never serves any of us.
We need to be more worried about what God and our Savior think of us. And that's a struggle for all of us.
Yeah.
And that's the human part, but that's where we grow and that's where we change.
So let's get to those hard topics then, because we had this exact conversation with Carrie Ann Lisenby. She was just on. Her podcast is going to come out this week. and we said, what happens with politicians is politicians will run and they'll stand up for those values. And they'll say all the right things, as I'm going to stand for values. I'm not going to go along to get along. We all hear those common terms. But then they get to Washington or they get to the state capitol and pressures come in, the money comes in, the lobbyists is the word I was looking for. The lobbying comes in. All of these pressures start coming in, and then their values just start bending and bending and bending. So that's where people become just frustrated with politicians, is because you promised this, you promised that. You were a good person before this happened. And I compared it to the Hollywood glitz. When you've got a hometown person that knows how to sing, and she's become a very, very popular singer, and she's hometown and just very, very conservative values, then all of a sudden Hollywood or Nashville or someone else picks her up, and then it's the skimpy dressing, it's the big parties, it's the drinking, it's everything goes along with it. And then all of a sudden they're just sucked right into that Hollywood Nashville environment, and all their hometown values are gone. So the same thing happens in the political world all the time. And so that's why people always ask their politicians, what happens when you get power and things just start getting thrown at you, whether it's money, whether it's lobbying, whether it's special interests? Are you going to be one of those people who are going to go along to get along, to become accepting, the values are going to bend? What's going to happen when you get up there?
Well, I'm not running for a second term. I am running for a first term. I have a lot of friends in legislature. I've worked with them on the state central committee. So the state central committee is elected at the organizing convention in the odd years. And those people, there's 14 of us from Davis County that go to meet with other state central committee members from across the state. And we talk about resolutions. We talk about needing a secretary of state. We talk about what things in our bylaws can we change. We talk about election integrity. And so there are people I know that are up there with really, really good hearts, but there is some pressure coming from the Senate to get good bills passed. So I think that replacing Senator Adams means that your senator here gets to represent you, that the senator in Southern Utah gets to represent their area. I think it restores a lot of that representative government all across the state. And you're right, it is going to be one of the hardest races. But I think that people across the state need to understand that their senators don't get a chance. They don't get to truly represent what their area needs because one senator has the ring. It's been a long time since I watched Lord of the Rings.
The ring.
Yeah. So my intention, if I can't get it done in 4, I'm not going to ask for another vote. I'm not going to ask for a vote again in 4 years if I have not been able to make make the changes that I want to make. I am going to compare the legislature to a snake pit. You're going to get bit. I'm planning on that. And I think where I am with my work, where I've had my steel tested, I spoke in favor of HB 261, and I took a lot of flack for that at work. And I had to stand up for my decision to do that. And so I have it from my friends. I've taken that flack from my friends, my coworkers, the people pushing leftist ideology and not providing the same capacity for people to understand the other side and then make a decision for themselves. I think it's made me a little rough around the edges. I'm not a polished politician. And if I'm polished in 4 years, then tell me so, because then I'll be like, oh, yep, I've been in too long because I'm not being true to myself. If I'm only saying what people want to hear, I think that's disingenuous.
And that's what people want to hear, is because, again, people change when they get into office, and a lot of people don't. I mean, Carrie Ann Elizabeth never changed. Trevor Lee's definitely not changing. He doesn't care what he throws out there. He doesn't care about anybody else's opinion. There's a lot of people around the state that do the same thing. I was born and raised next to Lisa Shepard down in Utah County. And
I like Lisa.
She's not changing at all. I love what she's doing in office. Stephanie Grecius not changing at all. Heidi Balder is not changing at all. But there's a lot of others that are bending, and we just got to get the benders out and say, look, there's a moral, there's values. It's not political. It's not necessarily Christian either, but there's a certain standard that we want to keep here in Utah and in the United States. It's not being kept right now. And I'm deathly afraid that Utah is going to go the way of Colorado. Deathly afraid, because I'm seeing it every single day how far we're bending.
Our sweet little Idaho's starting to turn also.
Idaho's starting to turn. And Colorado, I mean, we were talking to Mike Kennedy, Representative Mike Kennedy, and he was talking about Colorado, and his podcast comes out
Sunday.
Yeah, it comes out after this one comes out. So you guys will already be hearing his podcast by the time this one comes out, about how Colorado was just deep, dark red, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. And then it took a very, very short period of time for them to go just staunch blue. Marijuana got passed, all these other laws got passed, and it was a quick flip over less than a decade. Didn't take much for Colorado to go from red to purple, and then all of a sudden it's just a deep blue state, just like California or Oregon or Washington, anything else like that. And people look at Utah and say, there's no way that's going to happen here in Utah. If we keep bending, which we're doing, if we keep just going along and not wanting to ruffle anybody's feathers, to not be afraid of being accused of not being Christian or not being accepting or not being inclusive, we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're not as red as we think we are. So I grew up with 4 brothers. I was the only girl. So I think that has prepared me as well to not let other people define me. It's been a lifelong like things that have pushed that definition of who I am, and I've had to stand against that as well. I think what happens is there's so much opportunity in the legislature to write a bill that just helps your checkbook, and then that comes with consequences, and that's voting in a way that other people who provided that funding want you to vote. Bringing this back to high density housing. When we're building high density housing, we're building in the younger crowd, the housing for the younger crowd. We're increasing, we're pulling from other areas, and then we wonder why we're not as red. When our education system doesn't even talk about the Caucus system. We're not teaching about the Caucus system in education. We're not talking about the county governments, and I think it's something like 18% of Americans know the 3 branches of government.
We're not even teaching electoral college anymore.
Right. And then we wonder why. And then we wonder why our youth don't know. And then they have to go through life experiences that come back and say, oh, this is what Republicans were talking about 20 years ago. And so we've really hurt ourselves. And I think we've always had an average young population, but we're not investing in them. And I think that this corruption that has creeped in corruption always precedes communism. It always precedes the fall of a nation, is when homeownership becomes too far away that you can't afford it anymore. So why not just tell the government they need to provide that for me? Because look how they've screwed it up, right? Look at education. Oh, nope, I want it free, and you're going to give it to me free. And why? Because we haven't done enough with the time that we've given to them. I think there's a lot of communistic traits and Marxist traits that we have got to start identifying so that our youth know what it is and how to combat it. I had an X handle that was Karl Marx, and I would look for posts that were really Marxist, like, oh, well, that kind of speech shouldn't be allowed on social media. And I'd be like, 9 out of 10, Karl Marx would have said this, or I approve, and like just playing the devil's advocate on there. And it was incredible how many people or how many people didn't understand who Karl Marx was. And that is a reflection on our education system not being specific enough.
Well, we're seeing that right now in New York, right? When the people become so frustrated with how things are right now, I can't afford anything, I can't get into housing, and then you get somebody like Mom and Donna again up there and says, I'm going to give you free housing, we're going to have government-supplied grocery stores, we're going to take care of you, and you're so frustrated that you can't get ahead, And you hit the nail on the head when you're not being educated as to what socialism is, what communism is, what all these problems is. It takes you 2 seconds to accept that. Say, let's vote him in because he's going to help us out.
Right. Well,
and then once you start voting in free stuff, you'll continue to vote in more and more free stuff until is no more freedom. It is socialistic, communistic, and I can't tell you how many times in our own comments section, people like socialism isn't communism. We're talking about democratic socialism. We're not talking about actual socialism. Like, there's no difference. And we'll argue to our blue in the face that there's no difference between the term democratic socialism, and communism. That's all the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and the pillars of society, right? Education, law, family, religion. Those are the specific points that communism has infiltrated. Even here in Utah, and especially because we're being taught like to provide for our neighbor, to be kind, but I think the true principle is that we're supposed to be working hard. We're supposed to have sweat on our brows. And I think when we tell people, look, we're going to provide this for you because your contribution isn't enough, I don't think that that's compassionate at all. I think when there's even people with the people that I worked with that had disabilities, the search was to find, what are you good at and what are you going to enjoy, because you have something to contribute to the society. I had a client with cerebral palsy, and he had a part-time job, and he's like, Jen, I just want to work full-time. I feel like I can do good things by working full-time. And the places that I would try to bring him in to do internships and things like that were places where I had him volunteering at a place close by where the road home used to be downtown. And people would come in just making entitlement statements of, no, you need to let me in. I need to rent from here. I need to, like, they worked for a transitional housing place. But then they would see him wanting to work hard with the obstacles, the physical obstacles that he had. And he was teaching people, you have so much more ability than you know that you do, and you can contribute to society. And I think that a lot of what I learned from helping people with disabilities find jobs was that so much depression and feelings of no self-worth came because we weren't even asking them to contribute in the ways that they could. And I think lots of us just assume that that's our job is, oh, nope, there's someone with disabilities, you need to provide them with home, and then we isolate them from the rest of the world and then wonder why they're not happy. Mm-hmm. But I think that work is good for the soul. And I think that contributing, even if it's not in the way that everybody else wants you to contribute, you can find a way to contribute.
You
even
are
if
still
you're
valuable.
Absolutely.
And that's part of your journey, is finding where your worth is.
Well, it's part of God's value that he's put into us. So
I completely agree with that. Now, we've seen that so many times. I mean, we were interviewing the Warrior Risen Ranch. We've interviewed other people where you have people coming in from extreme trauma, military trauma, loss of parents, father, mother in the military, and kids that are absolutely devastated, complete loss of self-esteem, don't want to put any effort into anything, just absolute depression. And the second they get them out there building a fence or throwing hay bales, which is nothing, it's not like this great accomplishment, light comes back in their eyes, value comes back in there. I accomplished that, I did that. And they go out with a completely different perspective on life because they built a fence and they threw some hay bales.
Yeah.
It's so how work actually helps people. And we were talking to Burgess Owens a couple months ago, and he's like, the Black community has been depressed for so many years and have been forced into this dependency type of an environment where they're dependent on the government completely for their social assistance, their food stamps, all this kind of stuff for so many generations that it's been instilled in their heads that I can't get out of this. It's not my fault. It's the white man's fault. It's the system's fault. The system's against me. And it's so ingrained into their heads that they do not believe that they can lift themselves up on their own. And it's generational depression. And it's horrific, but that's what the left wants. Why? It's because they vote for them every single time. They have their permanent dependent voter. And now they're trying to do it to the illegal immigrant population. It's the whole reason why immigration is such a problem with ICE nowadays, is because we're deporting their electorate, their voters. And it's why we have sanctuary cities and states, because they're getting them in there, getting them hooked on social assistance, these social programs. Because once they know you're hooked, it's like a drug. They have control over you. And if they can make that generation like they've done with the black community, then they're permanently in office. That's why New York is lost. That's why California's lost. Minnesota, all these other states are completely blue, is because of all that dependency. When you build people up, when you give people value, when you get them out there working, telling them that you can do this, it's not the world's fault. It's not everybody else's fault. It's just the way things are. Life is not fair. You got to pick yourself up anyway. People start voting differently. Their behavior becomes different. Their morals become different. Everything changes. Everything changes, but that's what the left is afraid of.
Well, but there's purpose in struggle, right? The purpose is to figure out how to get to the other side of it, and then to look back and help the next person through that struggle. I think what's concerning about Utah, and we're not a blue state, yet we attracted, we're the third highest destination for people that were coming across the border. And I think it's because of our Housing First initiative for homelessness. And I think that that's changing. But essentially, so I was on a call with some people that are worried about people having access to food. And they said, well, we need to get down to the Lantern House as soon as we can, because everybody that was there has been housed, and now it's full of new Americans from Venezuela. So what do we do when they come across the border? First of all, they were the CB.
First off, what makes them a new American?
They just crossed the border and they applied for refugee status. So the CBP-1 app, Biden had it changed where you didn't have to provide ID. And that's why we saw IDs tossed everywhere, right? Is because you didn't have to have ID. And in fact, if you had ID, it would verify who you were, where you were, and any other times that you had been across the border. So they could apply for refugee status without ID, without age verification. And under the Biden administration, that made them legal. So they were directed to come to our homeless shelters, where the Housing First initiative is, how do you get a job if you don't have a home? Well, lots of people have had to overcome that, right? But we have taken taxpayer dollars and we say, come on in, we're going to put you in an apartment. You're rapid rehousing, which is you're put into a home or an apartment based on your family size. And you circumvent all the other people that are on our Section 8 housing list. So this is widows, people with disabilities, things like that there is an income level and those are the people that we do need to help, right? But we've allowed them to cut in line in front of all of them. And then Section 8 housing, the second you get in, if you have a job, if you don't have a job, your rent is $50 a month. If you get a job, your rent goes up to 30% of your income, and you have to report that income. So first of all, we're incentivizing not getting a job, or if you are going to get a job, then have it be under the table so you don't have to report that. But that is what we just told all these people that came into the shelters. Look, we're going to take care of you. You don't have to do anything. And eventually it's never going to be enough, because it isn't money that it isn't something that they value because it's free. And eventually the assistance that they receive isn't going to be enough anyway. And so I really worry about what that turning looks like, what's going to happen when it's not enough, and how many of them are being contacted to show up for protests. Hey, no kings. Well, okay, we don't have kings, and you're protesting because we don't have a king, right? And I think I just saw something that Canada is pushing legislation that you cannot make statements that criticize the government or you get 10 years in jail. Canada. And I hope that we don't, I hope that we don't go that direction. And I think it's our Second Amendment rights that keep us from heading in that direction.
What do you think is the biggest differentiator between you and Stuart Adams right now? What policy do you think is the biggest differentiator?
I think it's special interests in general. And my income does come from, like, 11% of our taxes do go to higher ed. So a portion of my wages is taxpayer funded. I think what differentiates me is I try to do the most with that funding. I'm not seeking funding from other tax buckets to help my personal business. I think he's just become so encumbered that the people outside of the state have seen how it's changed Utah. Like, our housing has become more and more unaffordable during his tenure than ever. And I really worry about what we're doing to our youth and what they're going to turn to, because homeownership has just, like you said, it's not 28 anymore, it's 40. I think that makes me different. I think that I'm more engaged. I'm a convention-only candidate, so I'm dependent on the delegates asking me those hard questions. And there's something about Davis County, and this might be all across the state, but I've only run for office in Davis County. We have experts that are delegates, that they take the time and they follow politics on their own. They have industry expertise, and they're not afraid to ask those hard questions at delegate meetings. And that's, I've had several of them recently that, well, what about this? And what about this? And I said, okay, what are your thoughts on that? Because here's my thoughts, and here's where we can come together on those things. I think that there's a tendency when you've been in office so long and you don't depend on the delegates, that you disregard the delegates. And I've written my own emails to legislators, and either I don't get a response, or I get a response that, oh, this sounds important to you. Well, I think that we've got to treat people better, and it'll be different.
I mean, my concerns are having somebody up there that's honest and compares things to the Utah Constitution. Like, and that's what I feel about the Republicans who are delegates, is they should be comparing, when you're vetting a candidate, does that mesh with the platform of the Republican Party? If it doesn't, I don't care if he built your subdivision and you live in his neighborhood and in his precinct. So does what he does, is it, okay, small government? No. With fewer taxes? No.
Right. Transparency, ethics and standards. Yeah. I think that those are massive concerns as well.
One of the biggest concerns I've got is I don't like good old boy networks, right? Where you've got favoritism. Everybody's up there for a reason. Everybody's been voted in. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody has a voice. You can't establish these little cliques in Congress or in the House. And that happens every single time. And part of the lie is there's these cliques, and then the cliques get power because of how many people vote together, vote in unison, vote with the team instead of with what is right.
Right.
Stop with the clique, stop with, well, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it type mentality, and participate, but keep your voice independent so that you keep yourself from being pushed one direction or the other because of some lobbyist or some blow of the wind or something like that. And decisions should be made because everybody else is doing it. Right.
And I think there's a tendency when there comes power, right, that you want to look like it's, oh, we're going to look more peaceful and set a better example if we all agree, but using intimidation and bullying tactics and keeping bills hidden and all of these other these things that do not or that kind of that quell free speech is not the way to bring people together. They're not asking for the data, so I'm pushing to be data driven. All those decisions, a yes or no bill on whether the inland port needs to have more access to things, that needs to be, people need to be asking for the data. Like, where's the data that says they need to be expanding on that access? sorry, to come back to schools, the president of of the Davis School District a few years ago, he pushed through legislation adopting the definition of homelessness from the McKinney-Vento Act, which is a federal definition. Well, part of that federal definition defines students. So if I get divorced, if I move in with my parents in a giant big house in Bountiful and I'm living in their basement, my kids are counted as homeless according to the Davis School District. And now, because it's in code, every school district, if you are living in a multi-generational home, well, that's unstable. And so your kids are counted as homeless so that they can go to the federal government and ask for more funding.
I have no idea.
Another definition under that is if you live in a mobile home park, you are considered homeless because that is unstable housing. And so last year, the Davis School District said, we have 3,000 homeless youth. Well, that, according to the McKinney-Vento Act, that's true. However, that doesn't give us a true definition of homelessness. That tells us there's 3,000 students. Well, how many of them actually need help? And if that student is coming in with that hasn't changed their clothes in a couple of days, that comes in looking hungry, that comes in late because of transportation issues, that whole family needs support, not just that kid, not the kid that's in Bountiful whose parents drive him up to school in a I don't even have a fancy car, so I don't
A Mercedes SUV.
There you go, one of those cars. That's not the family that needs the help. That's not the family that needs the food pack taken home on Fridays at the end of the week. And so where are we putting our money when one of the most affluent counties in the state is saying we have 3,000 homeless youth? It's not. We need to get back to some clarity on that. And how many of those students are qualifying for McKinney-Vento assistance because they live with grandma, or their parents moved in with a sibling, or they live with grandma because their grandma's getting older and needs some medical assistance. And I think that they're moving towards that direction, but it's not as transparent as it should be.
Well, there's waste, fraud, and abuse everywhere. Everybody is too apt just to give stuff away and not apt to
But you're
keep
so
control.
kind, Uriah.
Yeah,
You're
I know.
just so kind when you do that.
And people want to label me as harsh and evil and mean, and I'm like, no, I just want to be responsible for the money. I mean, I don't want forced charity. She talks about that all the time, is forcing people into charity. It's not the government's position to be giving away money. It's your neighbors, it's your friends, it's your family, it's the churches. That's where that charitable donation needs to come from. And it's not from the government. The government's there to provide absolute necessities, which is a shelter and clothes and food, and that's it. But only the bare necessities. It's not supposed to be a lifestyle. It's not supposed to be permanent. And all this stuff has become permanent. Why? Because, again, those in power have figured out is if they make it permanent, they got a permanent voter. And
Right.
so they use it for power. They use it for control, which is completely outside of the scope of why it should be there in the first place.
Right.
And I know for a fact that we're not going to end that. So I've just accepted that fact because the left has figured out how to use power and control. We're always going to have Democrats in office. It's never going to be gone. It's where the right, the conservatives, in spite of the labeling, have got to vote to control some of that. But as long as it stays as the pariah conversation where you can't touch Social Security, you can't touch Medicaid, you can't touch Medicare, you can't touch food stamps, nothing's going to be done with it. And then you have all this stuff like what's going on in Minnesota and California, that all this fraud that's coming out, all this stuff that Nick Shirley's talking about. Nobody investigated it and nobody does anything about it, because if they did so as a politician, they become evil, they become the conspiracy theories. So when it comes out like Nick Shirley did, then they come in and act. Why? Because they're not painted as the evil person. They're just responding to something that's already out public now, right? Because now I can act, because if I did it before, I wouldn't get back into office because I would be labeled as the evil person that's taking money away from grandma.
Yeah, I think that the system has allowed for a huge cushion of people getting funding from the state. And if we watch those disclosures really carefully, what's happening on the national level is happening on state levels. It's happening in Minnesota. It's happening in California. And it may not be the same systems, but there's still something where you can take off the top. You can, I think one of them is our homeless services. I know that things are changing, and I'm so glad that they're changing in the right direction. We have a new director of homeless services, which is a former, I don't know if you guys know Tyler Clancy. He's a former representative. He used to be a cop. He's served with people in homelessness. And so I think he understands the issue from a front line point of view. And there's really good organizations out there like, the Red Barn. I think that they were non-governmental, but I think because of bringing in the high density housing and the mixed use housing, that their property taxes they're not affordable anymore. So the Red Barn is leaving Davis County, which is really unfortunate. But there's another organization based on the Delancey Street model out of California that has seen huge returns on, huge progress that can be seen in the recidivism rate alone. So the Oversight Academy, if you guys worked with the Oversight Academy, you need to get them next. Their model is 200% accountability. So if I'm going into a meeting and I slip out for a quick whatever my vice is, I'm going to get told on, because that's my job of my neighbor is I'm accountable for you, you're accountable for me. And they have several businesses that operate under the umbrella of the Oversight Academy. And so they weren't taking any government funding at all until there was some issues with the property taxes downtown. I think they're getting some now, and I'm just crossing my fingers that it's sometimes money corrupts. And I hope that's not going to happen, because the model is working. There's amazing people that go through that program and then they come back because they've been through that mud hole, right? And then they come back and they help that next person through that mud hole. And so there's some good things that are happening on that front. And I hope that that all stays transparent.
I'd love to see a Utah Doge.
Yeah. I think
every government out there needs that.
Yeah. Well, and Tina is our Utah Doge. And what is the president of the Senate done to Tina? He's taken away a bunch of her budget. He's made her. Here's my favorite thing.
He tried to move her out of her office.
It's still in code that she's not supposed to be in there, but she said that she's maybe I'm not going to talk about that. I'll let her talk about how she's pushing back against that, because I don't want to bring any more retribution against her or backlash. But we have some really, really good people in office that are really fighting for good, hard things that are defying the odds. But Senator Adams is not one of them.
Well, I think there needs to be a whole lot more accountability in anything that's considered social assistance. Trevor Lee put forward a bill to get rid of all incentives to illegals, whether it's driver's licenses, it's food stamps.
There's no excuse for that not passing.
And then it got slaughtered in the Senate. Well, how did that not pass? Because that's, again, the whole point I'm saying is, how do we have conservative senators saying they're conservative, saying they're for Utah citizens, Utah people first, just like Trump is doing America first, and yet you're allowing all this? Because that's just straight up accepting all these illegal immigrants. We might as well just be a sanctuary state if you're going to allow every incentive out there to bring them in. And then on those people who do deserve it or say they deserve it, there's no accountability there either. There's no home visits, figuring out what kind of cars they're driving, or what kind of homes they're living in. I mean, it's unbelievable how little surveillance and oversight there is on any of these social assistance programs, like none. And how much Medicaid's getting out there, and how much food stamps is getting out there to people. And a lot of people try to think that, well, there's not that much fraud in food stamps. I'm like, there's so much fraud. Who spends $1,500 to $3,000 a month on food? I don't. I mean, even when I had 4 or 5 kids in my house, I didn't spend that kind of money on food. Why are you giving them a card that has $1,500 on it a month? What are they buying with that? I know so many people have been on food stamps that they can't spend the money, and so they're out selling it at 50 cents on the dollar. Here, I'll pay for your groceries. Just give me the cash. I'll give you $50 worth of groceries. You give me $25 in cash. And it's become this whole economy in and of itself that's taxpayer supported.
Yeah, it's interesting that the cry isn't, oh, it's not happening. Illegals aren't eligible for this. So that was never the pushback. So it is happening, and I think that we need. And there was some information that came out about accidents in West Valley, that 50% of them were from people without insurance, and I think that's how we're going to find specifically who is not here to build up our country, right? If they were given a driving privilege card, but they've fled accidents, then that's you're not going back to the line. You're never coming back. I think that our heart does go out to these kids, but when we incentivize breaking the law, then we get more of what we allow. And we have allowed it. We've just allowed it under the name of kindness. But we also have some pretty powerful lobbyists up there that whatever they say goes. I am also concerned about who is here. There were videos that said that we had a lot of terrorists coming in from other countries. And I talked to a veteran about it, and I'm like, how do they know that they're terrorists? And he said, well, they're catching some of them. They're not catching all of them. But when I was in Afghanistan, we started collecting identifications by eyeball prints, and we're catching some of them on the border. But if they didn't come in through certain areas, then we don't know who's here. So first of all, we need to know who's here. Second of all, we need to know their intentions. And then we do absolutely need to cut off the incentives and the taxpayer funding that's funding our own demise.
Personal experience. So I was downtown Salt Lake visiting Temple Square, walking out of the great walls that are there, and there's some panhandlers sitting on the sidewalk, always sitting on the sidewalk panhandling, and this person was in some pretty scrappy clothing, cardboard thing, please donate, right? Again, picking at the heartstrings, right? Mm-hmm. As I'm walking out, I'm waiting for some people to come pick me up. This brand new, it wasn't a Mercedes SUV, I think it was the higher end Nissan or something like that, pulls up, person stands up, walks over, gets the driver's seat, and it's
yeah, that's it.
Brand new car, panhandling. And if you think that has nothing to do with food stamps and Medicaid and Medicare and all this kind of stuff, it's happening all over the place. If you can get away with it, people will get away with it. And if there's no oversight on these programs, if you're not doing some kind of home visit, and people are like, well, there's not enough staff to do that. There's not enough money in the situation to do that. I'm like, there's plenty of money in there because you are spending it. If you had even partial oversight, your budget would go how much fraud, waste, and abuse is out there, and how much people are getting those type of benefits and not needing them. How much of that is going to illegals that shouldn't be here in the first place. It's happening everywhere. And again, nobody wants to tackle it. Why? Because they don't want to be labeled as the evil person. It's not compassionate.
Well, I think the way some people want to attack it is unconstitutional as well, right? Oh, we will be able to trace every dollar if there is no cash. Well, that is not the direction that I want to go. I don't want it. I think the government knows far too much about what I purchase anyway, because that's what all the data centers are for, right? Well, what did Jen buy last night? Because she swept the card. She's topped out on Twizzler.
If you're taking taxpayer money, I want to know where every dime you spend goes. That's not private. I don't care about your privacy. If it's taxpayer dollars, we know where every dime goes. That's just the way it is. If you don't want that type of disclosure in your personal life, then don't take any taxpayer dollars, period. End of story.
That's something to consider for sure. That, but people are still giving up their Fourth Amendment right?
Don't take taxpayer dollars in.
Yeah.
Don't take it then. Because we're not a socialist country. We're not redistributing wealth here. And that's all that is redistribution of wealth. If you're going to take my money, if you're going to take my taxpayer dollars, I'm going to know where you're going to spend it. Period.
And if that's a deterrent, then we have more money to give to the people who truly need it.
Right.
If that's
Same
a
thing with
problem,
immigration is like,
I'm not forcing you to take the money. Don't take it then.
Yeah. Yep.
Problem solved.
we need more of that money that's going to illegals to go to those immigrants who are trying to work through the system, who have been waiting for forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I attended a naturalization ceremony. Have you ever been to one of those?
Mm-hmm.
They are amazing.
My wife just swore as a U.S. citizen. She's going to be a year this June.
Congratulations.
And we went through the whole immigration process. It was massive.
Yeah. But it's almost, I wish that those were more public, because everybody needs to know how hard.
Because I recorded the whole thing as posted as one
Did
of our
you
podcasts.
really? Oh, okay. I'm going to share the heck out of that, because I think the more people see that who really wants to be here, who really wants opportunity, who really wants to contribute and not tear down our society, we need to make that process easier, right?
Right.
But it feels like there's this problem that is purposely created so that someone can make money off of the solution. And then the solution never addresses the real issue, because the solution is how much money is going to come back into my pocket. So we absolutely need that to be more transparent, for more people to see, okay, we need a change in that process, because it shouldn't take 10 years to become a citizen. It shouldn't take however much money, it shouldn't take $50,000 and all of that time and effort to prove your worthiness. But if you came across with under the CBP One app and you didn't provide your identity, sorry, that's you did not even abide by something so simple. If you're immediately using someone else's ID to work, that's got to stop. That's not a civil violation. That is identity theft, and that needs to stop. So there's a few things that are specific. Here's the symptom here at the end. Let's get down to the source and what we're allowing, and shut off what we're allowing.
Well, I want to point out that specifically. One, because my wife's Latin. I grew up in a Latin community. I speak fluent Spanish. My kids are half Latin. So I very, very deep ties into that community. I served in my mission down in Chile. I know what's going on there. When you're desperate, where you're just trying to survive, you will do whatever it takes to feed your family. And that's where the whole Social Security black market is out there, all this fake ID black market. Why? Because they're trying to survive. People will do what you allow them to do. So I do not fault the people. I do not fault the people crossing the border down in Mexico and just flooding this country, right? Because if you allow them to do it, they will do it.
Uh-huh.
The fault is in our leadership and in those in power that are allowing this to happen. They're giving them the incentives. You're going to get food stamps. You're going to get housing. You're going to get all these free stuff if you come up here and do that. And again, there are certain powers that be that purposely are doing that. Why? Because they know for a fact they're registering to vote, because all you need to do to register to vote is a driver's license and a proof of address. And you can check a box saying that I swear under oath of perjury that I'm a U.S. citizen. They're all going to just do whatever they want to do because you're allowing them to do it. Unless there's direct oversight, all this is just going to keep on happening. So it's not the people's fault. It's people that make the laws so wishy-washy to allow this to happen. But again, there's a lot of people out there that are not going to change it because it's keeping them in power. It's keeping them elected. And that's what you're fighting. You're not fighting the individuals. Don't think I'm bad-mouthing the illegal immigrants. I'm not. The reason why they're here is because powers that be let them be here. If we didn't have the incentives, they wouldn't have been here in the first place. Right. They wouldn't have crossed that border because there would have been no incentive for them to do so. They would have stayed back in their home country, and they would have rebelled against their own governments, fought against their own. There would have been a point in time where they would have gotten tired enough of what they're dealing with that they would have revolted. That's what the United States did. That's what the Boston Tea Party was all about. We got to a point where we were done and we revolted. Other countries need to go through their own Revolutionary War type process. But yet we incentivize the people from these other countries so much, just like water, they're going to take the least path of resistance. And if you let them do it, they will do it. Yeah. So we as a society, we can't fault the illegal immigrants. We can't fault any of these people because we're allowing it to happen.
A lot of them are held captive by doing that too. There are, in our own county, there are people who they find out where to go, right? Where to go get the illegal numbers and things. So there's places that will employ them. I will provide you with a dirty number so that you can work. Oh, great, now I can work. But once they're there, then they use and abuse them to commit crimes. If you don't do what I say, then you're outed. Then I will call immigration on you. And that was happening in some companies that I know of in my own city. And it wasn't until the person, the ringleader who was doing this to them, used some county monies to purchase things that enriched their own business, and people were afraid to blow the whistle on them. Because if not, then you'd be fired from your own job. And I can tell you off camera the names and things. But, it's not all fun and games for them too. A lot of them get used and abused because somehow nothing comes for free.
Yeah. Well, when I was working downtown before the road home was split into 4 smaller units, or the services were separated out, the officers, and I think Clancy he might have been an officer during this time, but there were 3 cartels that would kidnap teenage boys from their countries, bring them up, give them a bike and a bag of whatever, and say, by this time this evening, you're going to come back with this much cash or we're going to kill your family. So that, I think just that area couldn't handle that anymore. But because of I-15 and I-80, that was like a perfect drive off. Like, hey, we're just going to go through the drive-through, pick up all of our stuff. The dealers hid among the homeless, our most vulnerable population. And some of the people in this population I met many widows who their husbands had worked their whole entire lives owning their own business and didn't set aside enough for retirement, or they set enough aside for retirement, but they went through it. They went through it really fast because Medicare, if you have assets, you have to use those assets, or the assets were used for the husband when they were in long-term care, and then all of that funding was gone. So they were there at the shelter to get Section 8 housing because they didn't have any income anymore, and they had just supported a home business their whole lives. And there were people that came and they would say, you're going to give us your food stamp card and you're going to give us your PIN, and if you don't, we're going to come back and kill you. And so there's these widows that have just worked their whole lives, and where are they? They're at the shelter being robbed by people of their food stamps. And so that area needed a change so bad. I haven't had a chance to check in on other things, but I know that the Oversight Academy will also address some of that, especially with the requirements that they're putting in place for the tiny home village that's coming up in Salt Lake. I do see some information online. Oh, they're going to put us into work camps. Well, you're going to work is, I'm not saying work camps if it's done like slavery, that's not a good idea, but there is opportunity in work, and work has become has such a negative connotation for so many people that it's not right. And so there needs to be more education. There needs to be more family supports. We're spending a whole lot of money on the ambulances at the bottom of the cliff instead of putting the fence up at the top of the cliff so people aren't running off, right?
I love that. It's a great way to put it, right? That's so true. And I don't think anybody should be getting any type of food stamps or anything like that without work. I don't care if you're making $7.50 an hour. You need to be out there working and putting in the hours. You're not getting anything. If you're really unemployed, then, the problem with unemployment too is the only requirement to get food stamps, a lot of things, is you just have to apply for jobs. And people they'll apply for their 3-4 jobs a day, and they won't take any of them, and they'll stay unemployed. They'll just apply and apply and apply. There's no cutoff. And there's got to be some more responsibility there. You've got to actually get out and work, or we're going to cut it off after 90 days, whatever it is. You've got to be doing something to sustain yourself. And there's just no incentive to do any of that. So it's just out of control right now. It's absolutely out of control.
Yeah. I think some of the requirements, right now, it's never ending, right? But I had an event in my life that, had I not been given some, it wasn't a premonition, but I had this heavy feeling Jen, you need to go back to school. Jen, you need to go back to school. And then something happened where had I not done that, I would have been living in my parents' basement. So I think for me, education was a pathway that helped me provide for me and my family. And I'm not saying that everybody needs a master's degree, because I think there's a lot of classes that you take and you think, well, how is this going to apply to my life? Or even a 4-year degree. I think there's so much value in
Trade schools.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who I seek to be on my zombie apocalypse team, right? Everybody needs a plumber. Everybody needs an electrician.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't want their kids getting higher education right now because they're not getting an education at the higher ed. They're getting indoctrinated is what they're getting.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that. And unfortunately, I don't think we're doing enough to address that on the state level.
In higher education, what do you see on your campus?
I see, like I brought up earlier with the Charlie Kirk event, I see a lot of that. I see a lot of, had a nursing student that I spoke with, and he said, it is so prevalent, but I don't think all of us are seeing how much it is. Even in a nursing class, they're talking about trauma-informed care and treat everybody like they've been traumatized. And he said, and I raised my hand and I made a statement to combat that. And then after class, I had 8 people come up to me afterwards and thank me for saying something. So I think we can turn, we are turning it over to really a socialistic mindset and a communist mindset. If we don't have students that can stand up and make their beliefs known. I know that there's students that have said, like first day of class, hey, tell us your name, where you're from, and your pronouns. And that's like first day of class, that you're normalizing declaring what your sexuality is in the very first day. I think that there's some things that need to change.
What does my sexuality have to do with my education?
Well, how are you going to be a good little servant of social justice if you don't know how to define yourselves in those terms? That's what they're saying. I think it's contraindicatory to what God thinks of us, that we are more than our sexuality. And I don't really care who
you like to sleep with.
Yeah, it's
I'd
none
like
of my
to know
business.
more about who you are, maybe.
Yeah.
What are your hobbies, but who you sleep with is your own business.
Yeah.
No place in there. So let's go kind of button this up. Last 2 questions for you. First is, when you're talking to your delegates, what's the biggest questions that you get repetitively? And then once you're done answering that question, tell the audience about your campaign, what you're doing, where they can find you, meet and greet you're doing, that kind of stuff.
So it's been interesting to see how the delegates are informed on water, how they're informed on housing, on taxes, on being told, hey, your taxes are going down. Like the talking points that I started with have come from delegates that have said, I'm really tired of the government lying to me. I also see that people are very, very concerned about water. They want water for humans and not for tech. They're worried about their kids not being able to live in Utah at all, and that they'll have to go out of the state. I had an opportunity to move out of state when I was younger, and then I chickened out and moved back home anyway. And it's been good to have some family support. But I think that's what they're most concerned about, is there's so much information that isn't transparent. And one of my favorite websites is transparent.utah.gov. If you pop on there and pop in foundation, you'll see how much money how much of our taxpayer dollars has gone to foundations. You can see how much has gone to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You can see how much of it has gone to Catholic Community Services, and other religions. And I've popped in there to say, okay, what's Catholic Community Services doing with some of that money? Well, they're hiring foster parents for unaccompanied minors. So the claim of you're tearing up families is false when some of these unaccompanied minors need to be reunited with their families. but we're paying for them to be fostered in Utah and then provided with an after school soccer program in Utah. I mean, I think there's just a lot of things along those lines, that there's waste, fraud, and abuse. I think that I differentiate from some of my opponents because I'll say the hard thing, and it might hurt me. The truth, a lot of people don't want to hear the truth. They want to hear the frosting coated piece of cake that says, "Oh, you're just so good. Oh, we're the best managed state in Utah. Oh,
All is well in
America's-"
Zion.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but the best managed state is also the highest taxed red state. Those two things cannot be the same, especially with what we're facing. I think specifically with the housing market gonna soften dramatically coming up. My website is votejengarner.com. People can email me at votejengarner@gmail.com. And I need people to coalesce behind me so that we have one person coming out of the convention and one person going door to door. And I have the resources to go door to door that aren't paid. I think there's people that are going to pay for volunteers, but I have a team already that's ready to go door to door after convention. I'm going to tear it up, and we're going to make a change. I'm excited to do good things.
Sounds good. How many delegates do you have in your area?
It's like about 123,
Yeah, it's not too
125. Yeah, it's not bad. And there's some people some of them are people that elected me to the state central committee last year and 3 years ago. So I know a lot of these people already. And so they'll say, you don't need to come by my house because you already have my vote, Jen, but I'm still going to go by their house. I'm still going to call them. I'm still going to send them an email. I'm still going to.
A lot better than what Carrie Ann's looking at. She's looking at well over 1,000 delegates.
Yes.
And that's a lot of people.
Yeah. And I wonder what I think when you go to that level, when you go on a national level, who's on your team? Like, that is not a one-man show at all.
Yeah, but she's stubborn and she likes to meet with every delegate. So.
Oh yeah, and I know she's out there doing events and things like that. But I just
Any more meet and
That's
greets that you're
terrifying.
attending, or any more debates? Or?
they are on my website, and you guys did the coverage
The DCC one?
for the debate at the Davis County Conservatives. If you guys ever want to host another one where you ask harder questions, I'm all in.
Well, the only way we're going to be able to do that is if the competition actually shows up.
Well,
If we could get Stuart Adams at one of those things, I would do it in a heartbeat.
so there's another group called the Doers. Have you guys heard of this? They're basically, they're people in office that have decided that they are going to endorse other people. And so there's supposed to be an event coming up, and I think I got a screenshot of it somewhere. So he's supposed to show April 6th.
Really?
Yeah. So I thought, hey, I'm probably going to go and attend that just so I can show my face. I won't go in and make a stink or anything like that, but maybe.
You won't try to debate him?
Well, I'm not invited.
Have you been able to debate him at all?
No.
See, and that's just
No, he didn't
not
show-
the
yeah.
way things should work.
Yeah. But I think that the other thing about our legislature is I think there's a lot of bills that they were told how to vote, so they didn't bother reading the bill, so they don't know what they signed up for. And so I think they've given all of their opposition ammo for huge debates that should be happening, and they're not. So
All right. Well, thanks for being on.
thank you.
Again, everybody, like, subscribe, and share. We need all your help and support to get the podcast out there. Watch all the other podcasts that we put out there. Go up onto our YouTube page and see everything we put out over the last year. We have officially gone past our 1 year mark. We hit our 1 millionth view between all of our podcasts combined. We're well over 20,000 subscribers, all within 12 months. So help us keep growing. This is God and Country, and we will see you on the next video.